Chapter 561, The focus is clear. Drunk bro, why aren't you back yet? Fireball was already wailing in despair. There was no doubt that he was the weakest player out of the five. Vast Lushness had been sent flying, Bluey's and Sakura Zakamuni were busy rescuing her, and Fireball remembered that there was another still underneath Southern Lone Blade's foot. Right now, Fireball was no more than a clown as he tried to leap, weave, and chant spells right at Southern Lone Blade to force the man into leaving, but why would Southern Lone Blade bother with him when he could easily bear the brunt of the three players' attacks at once? Besides, now that he had a priest beside him, he sometimes even felt lazy to block the spells Fireball tossed over with his shield. I'm here. At this crucial moment, Goofy was finally in position. This was a pivotal point of the battle, and no one was taking note where he would be coming out of. All they knew was that the moment he appeared, he was already crouching before Vast Lushness, clutching Moonlit Nightfalls with his hands as he fended off that sword from unrivaled Lucky Star. That's quite the strength you've got there. Even though Goofy was not too strong himself, the knight unrivaled Lucky Star did not add much to strength, either. With both their subpar strength matched up, Goofy was able to hold on and resist the sword as he said this, turning to take a glance behind him expressionlessly. Sorry. Vast Lushness was embarrassed. She had not been standing idly and waiting for her death. Instead, she used her spell, Kiss of Death, the moment she saw unrivaled Lucky Star running toward her, but because Goofy had appeared so suddenly in the spell's path, that kiss ended up landing right on him. Goofy showed Vast Lushness his full face when he turned around, letting Vast Lushness see that it was him, so there was no need for her to mess around anymore. Goofy's eyes were not even on unrivaled Lucky Star, yet his actions were still against him. You look rather familiar, Goofy said when he turned to face unrivaled Lucky Star again as he straightened up and attacked. The body of Moonlit Nightfalls slid along unrivaled Lucky Star's sword, as if unimpeded at all. By the time unrivaled Lucky Star turned into a ball of white light, Goofy's shimmering sword had just finished being wreathed in an intense flame. Goofy's attack had truly been too fast. It was so quick that he had not even gotten an answer for that question he just asked. His eyes swiveled, and Goofy caught sight of the peeking flame-singed clothes. The moment flame-singed clothes saw that Goofy had his eye on him, he quickly shrank his head back. Goofy was pondering if he should finish that mage off when he heard Fireball yell, "Drunk bro, quickly come help." Goofy did not hesitate and quickly left Vast Lushness's side to come dashing over to him. Southern Lone Blade was currently feeling so dispirited that he felt like dying. Just as he was feeling pleased with himself for holding down Svelte Dancer with a stomp of his foot, it was now his turn to be trapped now. He had no idea how much defense Svelte Dancer had, but the woman looked to be unharmed even after giving her quite a few cuts with his claymore. Looking at her eyes that were aflame with anger, Southern Lone Blade was certain without a shadow of doubt that he would be met with a miserable end if he ever released her from beneath his foot. Now that the even more fearsome Goofy was rushing over to him, Southern Lone Blade no longer dared to dawdle. Stepping on Svelte Dancer and crossing over her, he gave a kick with his back leg, which sent her flying the moment he released his foot off her. Don't mind, fuck, you bastard. Svelte Dancer, who was originally shouting "Don't mind me," soon realized that Goofy had no intention of getting anywhere near to catch her at all. Seeing the man instantly duck to the side with great agility, Svelte Dancer abruptly felt her heart sour and quickly changed her words to curse at Goofy even as she ate a whole face of dirt when she crashed onto the ground. Are you okay? Vast Lushness stopped by and quickly checked on Svelte Dancer, but Goofy continued to dash ever forward to chase after Southern Lone Blade. Southern Lone Blade could not help but feel a fleeting sense of sorrow when he saw this. 1,000 Miles Drunk was truly a real man, to not give a whit of care for the other sex just like him. It was a pity that the situation he met this true man left him a little dejected. At this rate, how would his baby legs outrun 1,000 Miles Drunk with his full agility build? Disperse. Southern Lone Blade came to a stop and made his stand as he gave this order. The others naturally knew that he was prepared to sacrifice himself to stall for time so that the others would have a chance of escaping. With how things stood, this was indeed their only option, seeing that Southern Lone Blade was already having a very hard time escaping. Flame-singed clothes, who had been hiding all this while, turned head and ran. Realizing that Sakura Sakamuni and Blue's did not have any plans for him, he quickly dropped his wall of flame to force the two back. Meanwhile, Blackwater and Patty Scented Pastures were already executing Southern Lone Blade's initial order to retreat, so it was not difficult for either of them to escape. Being unable to take them all out at once did not dull Gufei's fighting spirit. With the blade of his sword lit with flames again, it threateningly slashed right onto Southern Lone Blade. Southern Lone Blade did not balk to the challenge and raised his shield forward as he charged into it. Gufei saw that Southern Lone Blade was keeping that block with his shield very low to the ground, so he knew that this man was treating this fight very seriously. The first time the two had had a skirmish in Linshui City, Southern Lone Blade had also used his charge to block the strike, but his shield was raised too normally, allowing Gufei to use a technique from his prone saber style to roll right into his guard. It was apparent that the move had left quite a deep impression on Southern Lone Blade. After unable to execute the same trick again, Gufei dodged toward Southern Lone Blade's left. Even though Gufei had no idea what was the angle the sword behind the shield would strike from, he knew that the sword was in Southern Lone Blade's right hand. Attacking an enemy on the left would be a little awkward to achieve. Gufei was confident that this sword of his would be faster than Southern Lone Blade's. The sound of metal meeting metal thundered about. Gufei's sword was indeed very quick, but Southern Lone Blade's was not any much slower either. It was just that the man had not used the sword behind his shield to do an attack. Instead, he flipped the shield he was holding on his left hand over to the side, which resulted into Gufei's attack landing on the shield. "Oh, no!" Gufei cried out to himself. Southern Lone Blade's charge did not stop there and then, and he brushed past Gufei's side after blocking his sword. The one he was targeting was not Gufei but Vast Lushness, instead. From the very start, Southern Lone Blade was clear on who his target was. Even if Gufei showed up, he was nothing more than a huge obstruction. The key focus of this entire situation had always been Vast Lushness. Vast Lushness had just lifted Svelte Dancer up to her feet. Since Gufei was on the attack, the two were very confident that Southern Lone Blade would be taken care of in a few brief strokes. As such, neither of them expected the man to actually get right past Gufei's attack and charge over toward them. Svelte Dancer had a faster reaction to this sudden change and was able to push Vast Lushness aside in time. Southern Lone Blade was a little dispirited, but he could not let this charge go to waste. He had no choice but to send it right towards Svelte Dancer, the woman who had ruined his plan. Svelte Dancer no longer had time to avoid this, so she took this charge squarely on her chest, flying high in the sky as she subsequently turned into white light. "Oh, fuck!" Gufei was astonished. Even though Svelte Dancer was a woman, he had considered her to be an iron woman that could not be defeated deep in his heart. With her whole body of equipment that provided her with attack power, defense, and everything in between, he did not think that she would actually die at the hands of Southern Lone Blade. "You teleported away, right?" Gufei could hardly believe what he had just witnessed and sent a message over to Svelte Dancer. "Teleport, your ass. You'd better get revenge for yours truly." Svelte Dancer's reply was clear. No matter how high a defense, it was not limitless. Besides, Southern Lone Blade was no run-of-the-mill warrior himself. His attack power was top-notch. Having already given Svelte Dancer many slashes of his sword when he was stomping on her, with her eating another charge directly as she did, how could Svelte Dancer withstand it all? No matter how excellent her equipment was, she only had that much HP as a thief. Southern Lone Blade was also surprised he ended up successfully killing Svelte Dancer. He lifted his gaze and saw the collapsed Vast Lushness not too far away, but he knew that he no longer had the chance to mount an attack on her. He reckoned that Gufei would set about to utterly annihilate him by now, and he could already smell the smoke belonging to a fire that was at the insta-kill level. "Mana!" Southern Lone Blade heard Gufei shout this, and his voice was really close to where he was standing. Southern Lone Blade struggled hard to shift his shield behind him as he turned in hopes that the metal's bulk could block Gufei's attack yet again. In the end, his shield was pulled away, and Gufei was now standing right before him. In an upward motion, Moonlit Nightfalls was already shooting right up for his chin. Southern Lone Blade could feel all his hair stand as he shuddered when he thought that he was about to be skewered in such a frightening position. He no longer had any park awareness or attempted any sort of technique and just brandished his sword plainly to cut Gufei in front of him with his conditioned reflex. Gufei, who had already positioned himself to another side, sent his sword to brush past that man's neck again. Now that she was back on her feet, Vast Lushness began to cast her mana sacrifice with her utopian magic staff. This was the item that Southern Lone Blade was after, so he naturally knew just what she was trying to do. Now that Gufei's attack was going to be enhanced by his spells in the next moment, he already knew the inevitability of his grim fate at that point. However, Southern Lone Blade had no wish to die too cowardly, so he began to wildly wield his sword and shield, hoping that Gufei would not have such an easy time getting close to him even as he began to run toward Vast Lushness. Gufei's mana was just a little off the amount he needed to unleash a twin incineration, and Vast Lushness's mana sacrifice would soon help supplement this. He decisively began his incantation, slashing out at Southern Lone Blade with his spell-infused sword. As for Southern Lone Blade's wild swinging of his sword and shield, all Gufei saw was the many flaws and openings he created as a result, so he simply ignored it all. The sharp whistle of wind sounded, and Gufei immediately came to a halt. It was as if a single bolt whiffed right past his eyes. If he had not stopped in time as he did, it would have most likely found the side of his head. The precision of this shot made in advance was extremely accurate. If Gufei had not reacted quickly to it, there was no doubt that he would have taken the hit. Everyone could not resist but look in the direction of where this bolt had come as a result of this sudden change. They saw a player darting out to the middle of the street at a high speed, with both his hands raised levelly. Another bolt was then released. Gufei could already guess who this strange archer was. As he quickly avoided that incoming bolt, Broken Water Arrow dove right behind a flower bed. "Big South, quickly run!" a disembodied voice shouted, overshadowing the sound of the whistling wind. This shot, however, did not originate from Broken Water Arrow. As Gufei dodged this incoming projectile, he realized that there was another archer shooting at him from a side of the wall. Southern Lone Blade could identify this voice belonging to his comrade Glue. At the same time, he was given a set of coordinates for him to retreat. No longer hesitating for even a moment, the man began to run accordingly and even attempted to run past Vast Lushness. The lady was no fool to stand there like a dummy for the man to cut and quickly took evasive action. The movement speed of the warrior and priest was about the same, so Southern Lone Blade did not dare to give chase as he buried his head and sprinted as fast as he could. "Where do you think you're going?" Sakura Sakamuni and Fireball heroically ran out to lend a hand. Bluey's had managed to replenish some of his mana after consuming a piece of fruit, so these three men had come forth in hopes of helping cut off their target. In the end, all they heard were the sounds of 3 consecutive shots, and each of the 3 men found a short bolt stuck right on each of their foreheads in the next moment, petrifying them where they stood. Chapter 562, Unable to Dodge. With Sakura Sakamuni, Bluey's, and Fireball, each taking a bolt to their heads, the 3 appeared to have been tagged with a label as they revealed a unanimous look of horror on their faces. It was evident that the sudden and precise shot had left the 3 quaking in their boots. "Quickly, take cover!" Gufei yelled at the 3 men. Broken Water Arrow's marksmanship was comparable to Gufei's skill when it came to PvP, and it was something well beyond the level that existed for most players. Especially since the game provided a certain level of assistance to any players making ranged attacks, this design only made it that much easier for Broken Water Arrow to feel like a fish in the water when firing his bolts. Seeing the 3 consecutive shots made, even the 3 targets themselves did not seem to realize what had just happened. Meanwhile, the difference in the 3's character showed once more. After Gufei yelled at them, Sakura Sakamuni and Fireball immediately hunched over on the ground boorishly and scrambled about for cover. It was almost as if the 2 were more than happy to find a rat hole to bury their heads in. Conversely, the imperious Bluey's was different, yelling angrily as if he were an iron-blooded warrior. "Which coward is it that injures someone secretly?" Thwack! The answer he got was the sound of another shot landing. Who was going to care about civility when engaged in PvP? Broken Water Arrow had fired another bolt. Now, there was not just a single tag on Bluey's head but 2, Instead, how troublesome. Gufei originally wanted to chase after Southern Lone Blade, but with the scamp recklessly attempting to call out a duel with the enemy, Gufei weighed his options and felt that saving a life was far more important than taking one. The blink spell he had waited all this while sent him materializing right before Bluey's, and he quickly sent that man sprawling to the ground with a swift kick. Bluey's was ready to blurt out a hellish tirade of curses when he saw a bolt whiz past right where he had been standing mere moments ago. He immediately realized that Gufei's kick had actually helped him out, for he would have had that third bolt tagged onto his head otherwise. It was hard to say if he could hold on to his life after taking that third shot straight into the head just like that. Despite the case, it was really difficult for him to even utter a word of thanks to Gufei. The latter did not really mind it and just turned around, only to find that Southern Lone Blade had seized this chance to run right into a small alley and disappear. The two archers engaged in the two-pronged attack each fired off several more shots respectively, and they were all aimed at Vast Lushness. Gufei was already prepared to find them making their move on her, so he quickly darted over, whirling his sword to block these projectiles. In fact, these two archers' main goal was to delay Gufei for a while. There was already no one left anywhere near Vast Lushness, so what was the point of killing her? Their ultimate goal was to loot the equipment and not kill her. Glue and broken water arrows stopped their pestering at this moment, and each released a few more shots as cover fire while they made their retreat. Gufei mildly entertained the idea of chasing after Southern Lone Blade, but upon seeing the bolts stuck onto the heads of the three men, he felt that it was possible for the enemy to be luring the tiger away from its den, so he decided it was more appropriate to prioritize remaining beside Vast Lushness to defend her instead of pursuing his own wishes. After a bout of silence, Fireball slightly poked his head out from within an open wall nearby. Looking all around him, he cautiously asked, Are they all gone?" Gufei did not dare to jump to conclusions so easily, so he checked the surroundings, looking to catch any sight or sound from the enemies. Sakura Zakamuni scrambled his way over the barrel he had been hiding behind as he hurried to Vast Lushness's side. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Vast Lushness saw the bolt still stuck on Sakura Zakamuni's forehead and did her best to resist laughing as she said, "You should pull that out." "Yes." Sakura Zakamuni had actually forgotten about it in his nervousness. Broken Water Arrow's marksmanship was superb. Not only did he demonstrate how accurate of a shot he was, his choice of position, timing when shooting, the rhythm of his cover fire, every single aspect of his attacks demonstrated his expertise and level of professionalism. Sakura Zakamuni might be a hunter, but he had his fair share of experience firing arrows, and he could really feel just how fearsome that archer was. It was far more of a subconscious realization for Fireball and Bluey's, since the two of them were not at all aware where Broken Water Arrow had been hiding when he attacked them. "It's a good thing his attack power isn't too great," Gufei said to Bluey's. Bluey's was plucking out the bolts, turning to look at Gufei when he heard his words. "What? Do you know that guy as well?" Gufei nodded. "His name's Broken Water Arrow." "Who is he?" Sakura Zakamuni and Vast Lushness came forward together and asked. "A bunch of guys that has a little history with me. It seems that they are recruiting Southern Lone Blade's gang as well." "Oh, yes. They're the same people who rescued Silver Moon," Gufei informed. "Damn." Bluey's had participated in the camping out of Silver Moon back in Beishi City, and was the one mentioned his sordid and disgusting past of that miscreant to all that was present. It became part of Bluey's game life to mock Silver Moon, who had gotten cooped up in Beishi City's Knights Barracks. As such, when someone suddenly rescued Silver Moon and left him in a state of limbo, he privately cursed those players that got his hated enemy out. By the looks of it, it's most likely Silver Moon who got those guys to target Vast Lushness for her magic staff, his King's Blade skill. Bluey's mind was rather quick, but halfway through his words, he suddenly covered his mouth, as if he had remembered something, before sneaking a peek at Vast Lushness. He only let loose a sigh of relief after seeing that her expression remained unperturbed. Ultimately, he did not dare to reveal too many details, so he could only viciously curse, "That asshole, we've got to show him what's what." That man had been cooped up in the safety of the safe zone for all those days, and that made Bluey's feel discontented since he had never gotten the chance to beat the man up. "How is the One?" Vast Lushness simply could not care for Silvermoon at all, and all she was worried about was Svelte Dancer, the lady who had heroically sacrificed herself for her. Gufei sighed. The name list for the 5 unyielding experts would see a change once more. Just as he said this, he could already hear Svelte Dancer shouting as she sprinted down a certain street. "Where's that asshole?" He ran off. Everyone answered regretfully. "Ran off? You dummy, why did you let him escape?" Svelte Dancer transferred her anger onto Gufei. Gufei helplessly replied, "Another player came out and created chaos, giving him the chance to flee." Actually, Gufei already had his blink ready for use, but he unfortunately went to save Bluey's with it, otherwise, he might have stood a chance at stopping Southern Lone Blade's escape. "Where did he run off to? Why didn't you give chase?" Svelte Dancer was pissed. "It was better to play it safe, the enemies are very cunning." Gufei felt a little awkward to say that he was worried for these people getting eaten alive, as that would have been too much of a blow on their self-esteem. "I'm so angry." Svelte Dancer was positively hysterical. "Big sis Svelte, don't be angry. There are other opportunities to get even with them next time. Look, your clothes are still dirty. Let me pat it out for you." It was unknown just where Fireball had popped out from, but he reached out one of his hands and was ready to help Svelte Dancer pat out that footprint left by Southern Lone Blade by the front of her chest. While Svelte Dancer might be mad, she was not to the point where she lost all her senses. Instantly, she shot Fireball a glare. Fireball's hand quickly slipped his hand to the back of his head and scratched it as he laughed dryly. "I'll leave it to Drunk Bro." "What?" Svelte Dancer was now eyeing daggers at Gufei. "Fuck." Gufei glowered at Fireball. "This guy's sleaziness has actually dragged me down, he's really looking for a good slaying. Let's take our leave here first." In the end, it was still Vast Lushness who had tugged at Svelte Dancer's hand. Helping dust her clothes, she led everyone away from this place. Over at another small alley, Southern Lone Blade was sprinting as fast as his legs could carry him, turning his head back every 2 or 3 steps but never once catching a glimpse of that black figure. It was only then that his heart slowly settled itself. He had already lost count of the number of twists and turns he made as he fled, and when Southern Lone Blade reckoned that there was no one else chasing after him, he slowed down his steps and pulled out his party channel to hail the others. "Everyone made it out all right? We're alive." Everyone replied except for unrivaled Lucky Star, who had died in that PvP from before. Southern Lone Blade heaved a long sigh. When Thousand Miles Drunk appeared, he really believed that their team was about to be wiped out again. They were truly terrified after going up against him time after time. "Oh, yeah, who is that other archer?" Southern Lone Blade had keen eyes. Even though everything had happened in a hurry back then, he was nevertheless able to tell that Broken Water Arrow possessed exceptional marksmanship. Be it that single shot of his that forced Thousand Miles Drunk to back off, or the moment when he consecutively scored a bolt against the 3 players, each shot he made was very wonderful. "They're a bunch of people whom I met while trailing after Thousand Miles Drunk. I was just about to mention them to you so you could come and meet them." "That archer said that his name is Broken Water Arrow. Has he really contacted you before?" Glue asked. "Ah, I think so." When he heard Glue's answer, Southern Lone Blade recalled a certain IGN that went by Broken Water Arrow, which had sent him several letters these last few days. The content of his letters laid out his intentions plainly, stating how they planned to deal with Gufei. They were wondering if Southern Lone Blade would be interested in lending a hand. For starters, Southern Lone Blade would never accept a proposition from a stranger. Moreover, his plan was to shun Thousand Miles Drunk like the plague as best as he could. This was why he did not give the letters a second look. Who would have thought that they would end up meeting like this so coincidentally? "Where are they?" Southern Lone Blade asked Glue. "Over at the Tower of White Sand," Glue replied. "Oh, I'll be right over, then." Southern Lone Blade was satisfied with the location. Unlike other players, Southern Lone Blade's gang rarely chose a place like taverns, where plenty of players congregated, to meet. Instead, they preferred rendezvousing at secluded corners. The Tower of White Sand was just a normal building within Beishi City, and the NPCs around did not really spend much of their time entertaining players. It was just the sort of isolated area that Southern Lone Blade loved. "Are we going as well?" the others were asking on the channel. There's no need. I'll go have a look first. The rest of you should take the necessary precautions, beware of bumping into 1,000 miles drunk, Southern Lone Blade instructed. Roger that. Timber, no need to keep watch of the Priest Academy. Let's put on hold that matter with Vast Lushness first. Southern Lone Blade singled out Verdant Timber, the other priest in his team of 7. He had been assigned to keep watch over by the Priest Academy for their plan to loot Vast Lushness's utopian magic staff. His job was to continue tailing Vast Lushness after she respawned upon death. This was also an aspect of their profession that Southern Lone Blade's gang had plenty of experience. Letting targets know that they would continue to hunt them would be a problematic development, so Southern Lone Blade and his men had the policy of not killing them immediately after. Sometimes, they would even patiently wait over an hour before striking the second time. The point was to ensure that their targets would not have any suspicion toward the safety of the spawn point. It was unfortunate that their assignment this time around ran into a snag. It was a pity that they did not manage to kill their target off in this short time, so this arrangement they had was made redundant as a result. Chapter 563, Everyone eyeing with contempt. Southern Lone Blade carefully made his way to the Tower of White Sand. In the distance, he could see 5 players gathered underneath the structure. One of them was his comrade Glue, and the other 4 were a priest, archer, knight, and thief respectively. Pacing forward in a hurry, Glue introduced the players one by one. Fleeting Smile, Broken Water Arrow, Silver Moon, and No Smile. Broken Water Arrow and Fleeting Smile were the 2 names that Southern Lone Blade he saw in those letters he had received before, and the other 2 were names he had heard of even earlier than that. This was especially true for Silver Moon, for he was a business associate that he had never met in person before. Southern Lone Blade surreptitiously glanced at Silver Moon, causing the latter to feel somewhat flustered as he immediately sent out a message to Southern Lone Blade. Don't mention a word about the matter with Vast Lushness. Southern Lone Blade did not even bother to read the message. They were professional larcenists, they would never deign to reveal the details about any of their transactions even if Silver Moon did not do the same. However, the scumbag's despicable mindset led him to think that such a thought had crossed the other's mind, which only served to worsen Southern Lone Blade's impression of the man. So, you're Southern Lone Blade. I've long since admired you. Yi Xiao greeted, giving Southern Lone Blade quite the shock. Out of the 4, No Smile and Silver Moon could be considered as the famed individuals, while he had just witnessed Broken Water Arrow's skill himself, yet the first to come and greet him was this unremarkable priest. This act itself made it apparent that this priest was the true leader out of the lot, and that was something he had not expected. If you've received those letters we sent, I do believe that you already know why we're here, Yi Xiao said. Southern Lone Blade nodded. So, what are your thoughts about it? Yi Xiao asked. 20,000 gold coins, Southern Lone Blade replied. Excuse me? Yi Xiao was stunned. It isn't easy to go up against 1,000 miles drunk, Southern Lone Blade explained. You mean to say that you'd require payment to go up against 1,000 miles drunk? Yi Xiao asked. Southern Lone Blade nodded. Silver Moon wanted to say something from the sidelines, opening his mouth for a bit but ultimately held back from uttering a word. Then, what's the idea behind the 20,000 gold coins price tag? Yi Xiao asked. Southern Lone Blade was well versed in this line of work, so he knew what Yi Xiao meant to find out when he asked about the idea, so he immediately explained, 20,000 for a level. Under level 40 is subject for future discussion. Everything he drops will go to you. That's still a rather exorbitant quote, Yi Xiao remarked. I'm sure you've all exchanged blows with 1,000 miles drunk before, so you are of course all the clearer just how ludicrous that man is, Southern Lone Blade said. That's right, and that's precisely why I'm looking to trouble him. Yi Xiao nodded. I'm afraid that before you can even cause trouble to him, he will become trouble for you first. Southern Lone Blade said this evocatively. That was precisely how his team had ended up provoking that beast of a man. He's already trouble, which needs to be taken care of, Yi Xiao said. As long as the price is right, we aren't afraid of trouble. Southern Lone Blade chuckled. You'll get your money, but the condition will be that you must completely listen to my orders, Yi Xiao said. Fine, But we wish to know every single detail and aspect of your plan. We have no intention of becoming your cannon fodder, Southern Lone Blade said. That's no problem. Yi Xiao nodded. Then, this is a done deal. Southern Lone Blade extended his hand out. Don't be in such a hurry. This sum you're asking is a little too much. I don't have that much at the moment, so I'll need to go raise the funds. Yi Xiao's hand had yet to move. I'll be waiting. Southern Lone Blade retracted his hand. In that case, until then? Yi Xiao asked. Until then. Southern Lone Blade nodded. He shot a quick glance at Glue, and the two made to leave first. We've finally settled that end, Yi Xiao said to Broken Water Arrow. Yes. Broken Water Arrow nodded. Silver Moon and No Smile were looking at each other. 20,000 gold coins level. The two firmly believed that they had just borne witness to the highest transaction in Parallel World ever since its inception. That guy really dared to say it. No Smile mumbled to Silvermoon in a low voice. Silvermoon nodded. He had dealt with Southern Lone Blade before, so there was no need for him to ask about his idea like what Yi Xiao had done. He knew what 20,000 gold coins meant a single level. Silvermoon had already figured out that Southern Lone Blade did not want to make such a deal when the latter opened with such a large sum. That was done so as to make it easy for the other party to back down accordingly. Just considering the fact that getting Vast Lushness to drop her Utopian magic staff cost 3,000 gold coins when the price of the staff itself should be at about 2,000 gold coins, that meant the levels that Vast Lushness would have lost in the process were only priced at 1,000 gold coins, and it would be for a number of levels that was not even explicitly stated. Looting a dropped item off a player hinged entirely on luck. It was considered as lucky for an item to drop at the first kill, as that meant that the cost of Vast Lushness as one level was 1,000 gold coins. If unlucky, she would have to be killed 10 times before an item dropped, which meant that the 10 deaths Vast Lushness experienced was only bought for 1,000 gold coins. In contrast, dropping the level of Gufei was worth 20,000 gold coins. How was that not a sky-high price? Southern Lone Blade's lion-sized maw was already unrestrained enough when he quoted that insane amount, yet it was the priest who was all the more unrestrained for boldly chomping down on the offer. Silvermoon was momentarily confused by this, unsure if Yi Xiao was actually a newborn expert. Did he have a semblance of common sense even? He even looked to be happy having completed such a foolish transaction. 20,000 gold coins. Doesn't that mean that Southern Lone Blade will be taking a 10,000 gold coin deposit? Is he perhaps thinking of disappearing the moment he gets a hold of that 10,000 gold coins? Thinking about it, Silvermoon sent a message over to Southern Lone Blade, hoping to test the waters. You've struck gold now, you rascal. Just who is that guy? He's so rich. Southern Lone Blade was probing Silvermoon as well. Silvermoon of course sidestepped his question and continued, so, you ended up trapping yourself, eh? You never even considered that the man might accept your condition, huh? If he isn't gonna agree, how else am I gonna earn money? Southern Lone Blade countered. So, you're actually serious? Silvermoon asked. Did you think otherwise? Southern Lone Blade retorted. Then, if you do indeed end up looting 1,000 Miles Drunk's equipment, how much is that gonna go? Silvermoon asked. Sorry, but I'm not accepting any request to loot his equipment, Southern Lone Blade rejected. If a single level would cost 20,000 gold coins, even if Southern Lone Blade were to accept requests to loot 1,000 Miles Drunk of his equipment, there was no way Silvermoon would be able to afford the exorbitant sum for the assignment. Silvermoon only wished to shift the topic in this direction, so he hurriedly said, then, if, by chance, 1,000 Miles Drunk's sword does drop, I'll pay 10,000 gold coins for you to pick it up. Silvermoon calculated that if, at the time that they confronted 1,000 Miles Drunk, and he and Fleeting Smile were to lend a hand in the fight, neither would be at the front lines. Broken Water Arrow was a ranged character, so he would not be in melee range, either. Meanwhile, No Smile would surely attempt to act like a fish in troubled waters and would seize any sort of advantage he could find to keep himself out of harm's way. Then, there was that cool apple person. Still, that twerp was apparently only interested in duels, so there was no guarantee that he might appear. As such, Southern Lone Blade's team was likely to be the only players near 1,000 Miles Drunk when they were doing the act, so if any equipment was to be dropped, It was evidently going to land in their hands. Even though Southern Lone Blade mentioned moments ago that he was not claiming ownership of any equipment dropped, who knew what he might be thinking when that really happened? Silver Moon decided to make the first move. Any equipment they came across in the course of their larceny would often be sold to the highest bidder. Rarely would they ever keep it for their personal use. Who would have guessed Southern Lone Blade's answer, though? Equipment? We're not picking up his equipment. Fucking hell. Still with the games, Silver Moon cursed inwardly before he said, then, help me pick it up. There's 10,000 gold coins in it for completing the task. Silver Moon was paying an exorbitant sum for this. After hearing that Gufei's sword was considered as one of the 3 strongest weapons in Parallel World at the moment, and that it even had a Dark Knight skill within it, Silver Moon felt it would be well worth every coin to get it into his hands. At most, he'd sell his King's Blade away to get the funds for it. The value of the King's Blade was mainly in parties, anyhow. Considering how Silver Moon's namesake was in the pits of notoriety, he knew very well how impossible it was for him to mix around with any sort of mercenary group, guild, or organization. Holding onto the King's Blade could possibly end up painting a big target on his back, so if he could swap it out with Gufei's exceptionally powerful sword, he could then be an independent paragon of strength. That would also be a very satisfying matter in itself. Silver Moon was still dreaming about this fantasy when he saw Southern Lone Blade's reply. I meant it when I told you I'm not picking up his equipment. Stop with your nonsense. What? Is it too cheap? Will 15,000 gold coins do? Silver Moon was determined to seal the deal. But in the end, he got no further reply this time. When he tried to fire another message of his, he got the system prompt, the player is not accepting messages from anyone not in his friends list. Fuck. Silver Moon bellowed. He still had an ongoing business with Southern Lone Blade regarding vast lushness, and he had already paid 2,000 gold coins just for the deposit alone. That was already the entire fortune he had in his possession right now. Evidently, if they did not get the Utopian magic staff back, there was absolutely no way he could get his money from Fleeting Smile, and now that Southern Lone Blade had removed him from his friends list. Shit. Silver Moon's expression became twisted, and no smile beside him found it to be strange, but he did not dare probe further. Silver Moon quickly moved up right beside Yeeziao and spoke, do you guys think that Southern Lone Blade guy is reliable? Yeeziao turned to look at Silver Moon, asking, what's the matter? I've never heard of such a huge transaction like 20,000 gold coins. That guy is sure to take the deposit and abscond after acquiring the 10,000 gold coins, right? Silver Moon hedged. How do you know that the deposit will be 10,000 gold coins? Yeeziao wondered. Silver Moon was momentarily stunned and decided to come clean. I've had dealings with the man before. The deposit for his transaction has always been half. Yeeziao looked him in the eye as Broken Water Arrow spoke up. Is that so? From what we know, the deposit he asks for has always been 20 to 30% of the agreed on price. No, he's always taken 50% for deposit from me, Silver Moon refuted with certainty, only pausing after he had said it. He looked at Yeeziao and Broken Water Arrow, even no smile, and all he saw were looks of sorrow. He sure treats you different, Yeeziao commented. Fuck me. Silver Moon was even more depressed. Southern Lone Blade only charged others a third as deposit, but half for himself. Shit. Silver Moon's such a bastard. He's literally worse than scum. Over by Southern Lone Blade's side, the man kept sighing after he deleted the guy's name from his friends list. What happened? Glue asked. Southern Lone Blade recounted to him what had happened, and Glue immediately expressed his agreement. He's really worse than scum. I've already deleted him from my friends list, and we won't have any further dealings with that man after this business, but there's no telling when that bastard will throw us under the bus, Southern Lone Blade informed. You deleted him? Considering that he still has his assignment for us, isn't he gonna get mad? Glue asked. Yeah, it's a real pity that we can't see him all exasperated and alarmed, Southern Lone Blade replied. Aren't you perhaps a little too impulsive? That guy is capable of doing anything. Glue was worried. Of all the people possible, I'm not gonna be afraid of him. If we're even scared of someone like him, there's no point in living any longer. Just thinking about him makes me angry, Southern Lone Blade said. It's still better to be careful, Glue cautioned. There's no need for you to worry. Just what sort of tricks can he pull now, anyway? Attempt to tell tales of us to that fleeting smile person? What a joke. Do you really think that they are fools that are unaware of just what sort of man Silver Moon really is? The only reason they have him tagging along is no more than to make use of that powerful skill he has. There's no chance of him jeopardizing our agreement with that priest, Southern Lone Blade said. Then, what about the assignment Silver Moon has with us? Are we still doing it? Glue asked. Of course, we are. I have issues with the man, not the money the job entails, Southern Lone Blade said. But you've deleted him, Glue pointed out. Deleting him doesn't mean I can't contact him. Just let him wallow in his despair first, Southern Lone Blade said. Glue had no words for this. Furthermore, I can tell that the rascal is really afraid of us mentioning our transaction to Fleeting Smile. It's very possible that he has stirred something up. I'm gonna make sure to poke it out of him next time. Why don't we just loot the King's Blade right off him? Glue suggested. Hey, that's a good idea. We're always helping others with their business. Perhaps, we should give ourselves a hand next time. Southern Lone Blade was all for it when he thought of something else. Oh, yeah. How did you run into them? I was following Thousand Miles Drunk, right? It turned out that those three were also keeping an eye on him, and that was how they noticed me, Glue replied, feeling very ashamed. The three of them? Yeah, that broken water arrow person hasn't joined them yet, and I was about to tell you guys about me being discovered by them, but Thousand Miles Drunk happened to disappear around this time, Glue elaborated. I told them about the matter. Then that Fleeting Smile guy called his men to come help us deal with the situation. How did Thousand Miles Drunk disappear? Did he teleport? That Fleeting Smile said that it's something called the Windchaser's emblem, a piece of equipment earned from doing bounty mission. Upon the completion of a bounty, the user can activate it to teleport him or herself directly to the bounty assignment hall. That explains it. Southern Lone Blade recalled that the place they had struck happened to be near a bounty assignment hall. It seemed that their enemies had specifically chosen that location. That was really close. Southern Lone Blade wiped off his non-existent sweat. If it had not been for Glue and Broken Water Arrow's timely intervention, even if the others managed to flee with their lives, Southern Lone Blade was certain that he would have been a dead meat. So, what do we do now? Glue asked. Let's rest up first. I've accidentally killed off Svelte Dancer just now. How very unlucky, Southern Lone Blade glumly answered. Glue understood what he was feeling. Their line of work was very offensive to their victims, yet they were also afraid of offending people at the same time. Take the enmity they'd now had with Gouffé as example. Ultimately, the moment they had an assignment on Vast Lushness, someone whom the man was acquainted fault with, that guy instantly appeared to lend a hand the moment he caught wind of it. By the same logic, having killed Svelte Dancer once, that naturally meant that they had offended yet another powerful entity. Furthermore, it just so happened that their faces were not covered this time around, which meant that they had once more gotten themselves into trouble with someone whom they would not be getting rid of anytime soon. Their grieved Svelte Dancer suddenly sneezed twice loudly. Gouffé and the others seated around a table were staring at that cold gleaming dagger she had jabbed onto the table and shrank their heads back without saying a word. I will most definitely rip him to shreds, Svelte Dancer roared after she finished her sneezes. I'll help you, Gouffé consoled. Go and get that bunch of your scoundrels whom you call friend out here. I wanna hire you guys to hunt him down for me. Svelte Dancer was still yelling angrily. Hire us? Then, let me introduce you to an expert, Gouffé quickly recommended. Everyone stared at Gouffé, all believing that he was about to shamelessly put his name forward. Eternal Dominion. He's a professional, Gouffé continued. Svelte Dancer was stunned for a moment, for she, too, thought that Gouffé was about to recommend himself for the task. Who would have thought that he really had someone in mind? I'm only saying it for the heck of it. I want to kill him myself. Anyone stealing him from me will have trouble with me, Svelte Dancer declared. Chapter 564, Be a little more proactive. Then, are you gonna be hiring someone or not? Gouffé scratched his head. Svelte Dancer looked at him contemptuously. Why are you being so passionate for? Do you have some sort of relationship with him? Are you thinking of earning commission from yours truly right here? Who's thinking of earning commission? Gufei was affronted. My comrade Eternal Dominion's situation is slightly dire. He's playing this game and using his good kung fu skills to earn some extra dollars by picking people. I just mean that we can help him out a little. What commission nonsense are you spouting about? Are you for real? Svelte Dancer was all confused. Gufei nodded his head, his expression all somber. Vast Lushness was skeptical, however. Why is he still playing this game if he's in a dire situation? The cost of the equipment to play Parallel World was not cheap, so anyone who was in the state of destitute that Gufei was describing should be unable to afford it at all. Well, he placed all his eggs in one basket, you know? He truly can't find any job in the real world, Gufei explained. Is that so? Then, aren't you in a similar situation? Svelte Dancer asked. She knew that the two men were the same sort of people. My situation's a little better, Gufei hedged. And why is that? Svelte Dancer pressed. Because I have more relatives. Gufei figuratively wiped sweat off his forehead. Everything simply could not be explained in one sitting if they were to really dissect why his family was wealthy and Eternal Dominion's was not. They would have to look back in the annals of history and trace all the way to the rules that the two families had and some of the changes made respectively, as well as the opportunities present. It was really complex. Gufei did not have a good grasp of the matter himself, so all he could do was make up a simple excuse. Oh, you depend on familial aid to survive. It was clear that Svelte Dancers had misunderstood what Gufei meant by more relatives. Sure. Gufei thought about it but was still too lazy to give a proper explanation. Then, call Eternal Dominion over. He sounds so pitiful. Svelte Dancer was inundated with compassion. Okay. Gufei quickly sent a message over to Eternal Dominion. He originally thought that poor boy would be elated, but who would have guessed that the reply he got was very awkward. What? Another job? I'm quite busy right now, and I don't think that I can find the time to head over to where you are. Where are you, anyway? Beishi City, Gufei answered dutifully. Beishi City? That's way too far. It's gonna take me so much time going back and forth. How much am I getting? We'll talk about this more if it's cost efficient. Gufei felt utterly choked. They had not seen each other for several days, but from the tone of the brat, he seemed to be doing quite well for himself, and his days were spent in a rather fulfilling way. Just as he was wondering how he should reply to this message, Svelte Dancer saw the change in Gufei's expression and quickly asked, how is it? Have you gotten a hold of him yet? He seems to be rather busy recently as his business and game is picking up. Gufei was able to remain composed, not feeling unhappy despite the cold response from someone he had passionately advocated moments ago. After all, he did introduce Eternal Dominion to the job of a professional gamer in hopes that he needed not live in abject poverty while practicing Kung Fu. He felt a sense of pride and satisfaction when he heard how Eternal Dominion was thriving. So, is he coming or not? Svelte Dancer pressed on. It doesn't matter if he's coming or not, you've still got me here, right? Gufei tried to laugh it off. Are you sick? Svelte Dancer scorned. Gufei laughed it off, not explaining further. Just as they were in a state of limbo over what to do with the matter at hand, it was unknown just what was going on with Eternal Dominion as he suddenly sent a message. Haha. Oh, it seems that I have nothing happening these few days. I guess I'll make a trip over. Beishi City, is it? Yes. Gufei wiped off his cold sweat. He wondered if the kid had actually stated he did not want to do it before so as to intentionally raise his status by making himself sound busy. It seemed that, over the last few days, the man had learned to be a shrewd businessman. I won't be able to make it today, but I should arrive tomorrow, Eternal Dominion said. Are you sure tomorrow is fine? Gufei asked. Lori City was a good distance away from Beishi City, and the amount of time Eternal Dominion was able to spend online was not too long as well. No problem. I'm currently at Linshui City's harbor, and it's not too far from Linian City. Isn't Beishi City just right next to it? Eternal Dominion replied. That's good, then. I'll see you tomorrow, Gufei said. After sending that message, he turned to Svelte Dancer. He's coming over tomorrow. Who? Svelte Dancer was lost. Eternal Dominion. Svelte Dancer apparently thought that they were past this topic, never even considering that they would revisit it a few seconds after, so she was perplexed. Didn't you say that he's busy and can't make it? He suddenly said it, he's coming. Gu Fei was helpless. Are all you kung fu practitioners touched in the head or something? Svelte Dancer asked. Gu Fei was speechless. There was nothing left to discuss that night, so Gu Fei logged off as per his usual time. While Vast Lushness might still be facing her crisis, none of them dared to be careless any longer. The members from Forever in Flowers and Bluese's men, which numbered over the hundreds, swarmed out of the city to grind their levels with her, so they were no longer afraid of Southern Lone Blade striking once more. It was just that the style of the two groups was entirely incompatible and simply could not see eye to eye with each other. The personality of those hailing from Y City was the sort that would immediately fight someone they could not stand the moment they met, and in the entire night of grinding, they suffered 5 casualties due to infighting. Those deaths turned out to be for naught in the end, too, as the two groups continued to grind their levels together. Blues and his veteran gamers were all silently marveling over the fact they had never seen such an odd manner of getting along before in all the time they've been gaming. Svelte Dancer originally hung out with them to grind at the start, but she soon slipped away halfway through the night, wandering about all the grinding map, hoping to find traces of Southern Lone Blade but unfortunately failing to do so. Actually, Southern Lone Blade and his team did see Svelte Dancer that night. It was just that due to the profession they were in, they were highly vigilant. Whenever the team would be grinding, Glue would divert part of his concentration to take note of their surroundings for any players that would have an ulterior motive to get anywhere near them. Before Svelte Dancer could even catch a glimpse of them, Glue already spotted her in advance. Bullying the enemy when they were alone was only something a team led by Silver Moon or No Smile would do. Southern Lone Blade and his gang were professional and disciplined. If it happened that it was only Svelte Dancer beside Vast Lushness, they would definitely give it a shot, but if it was just Svelte Dancer alone, they would not even hesitate to avoid her. None of them felt it was a necessity, as killing Svelte Dancer would simply be a waste of time and a meaningless endeavor that contributed nothing to the task assigned. The next day when Gu Fei went online, he first checked in with Svelte Dancer and the others, only departing to look for Eternal Dominion after all of them reported that they were safe. Eternal Dominion had logged on not too long ago himself and had just set off toward Beishi City from Linian City. Gu Fei reckoned that it would be time for him to log off by the time the guy reached the city. On the contrary, it was the 5 members of Young Master's Elite that had made their way over to Beishi City. After Gu Fei's fight with Southern Lone Blade last night, he informed his fellow mercenaries about that miscreant being back in business. The 5 that were still in Linian City, playing the guessing game about the whereabouts of Yi Xiao's group, instantly made their way over without another word after Gu Fei's report and spent the remaining half of the night in Beishi City. In a tavern in Beishi City, a horde of players were seated at the various tables around. Not mentioning Bluese's men and Forever in Flowers members, just the named players alone could fill a whole table. Gu Fei was really speechless. Comrades, we're only going up against 7 players. We'll never ever have the chance to see them appear our whole lives with so many of you here. Young Master Han, who had heard Gu Fei's formation last night, saw the packed tavern right now. There were even players without seats, so his next words dripped out with contempt. How are we going to draw the enemies out from hiding at this rate? You guys are really too much. Since there are only 7 of them, it is more than apparent that we will use our numbers to bully the few. We should not be waiting for them to appear. Rather, we should take the initiative to drag them out in the open. Yes, we should have done it that way sooner. Blues slapped the table. He had many players on his side, yet he ended up confronting the enemies by himself yesterday. He was already feeling that something was amiss, and now that he thought about it, what sort of logic was that? He held the numerical advantage. Why would he need to lure them out by feigning weakness? If we do it like this, we might scare them away, Gu Fei argued. If we scared them away, Vast Lushness will be safe, and our goal is achieved, Brother Assist reasoned. That's right. Everyone in the tavern nodded in agreement. Gu Fei was depressed. It was apparent that there was an ideological difference here. The majority of them were thinking conventionally, using their total combat strength to achieve shock and awe. They were relying on it as a deterrence to their enemies doing the deed. Meanwhile, Gu Fei was hoping to lure the enemies into doing the deed before using their combat strength to directly eliminate them. There was a saying that went, A hero uses martial arts to violate the law. 1. Sure enough, Gufei's intention created a greater dissonance. Bluey's was clearly a doer, so the moment he felt that the idea proposed to be reliable, he immediately organized his men into parties and assigned them to patrol certain areas. Just as he managed to assign half of his men, a dissonant voice was heard as a player feebly raised his hand. May I know just who we are going after? Eh? Bluey's was stunned and began to exchange glances with all the players on the name table. Evidently, despite the many players gramping this establishment, most of these bit players had no clue just who Southern Lone Blade and his team were. They could not possibly write out a placard calling for Southern Lone Blade, "Please report to me," right? From this incident, it could be seen how much foresight Southern Lone Blade and his men demonstrated by regularly keeping such a low profile. Even if anyone wanted to mobilize huge forces to search for any traces of them, a good chunk of these people simply had no idea who they were beside their names, so there was simply no way for them to execute anyone, accordingly. God damn it. Bluey's absolutely vexed. Those gathered here, is there anyone, aside from the handful of us, that can recognize that man? Brother Assist asked. In the end, the players who could were just the 6 members of Young Master's elite, Vast Lushness, Bluey's, Fireball, Svelte Dancer, and Sakurazaka Mooney. It was only a total of 11 players. Should we split into 11 groups and search for them? Brother Assist asked Young Master Han for his opinion. That's too little. Young Master Han had a very good grasp when it came to maps. Everyone's head was hurting. This also demonstrated why the talent was a valuable commodity in Parallel World. In their current situation, only the talented could recognize Southern Lone Blade and his men. Everyone else was entirely incapable of doing so. Talent was truly in short supply. Do any of you know how to draw? We can draw a portrait of them, one of Bluey's men suggested. Gufei was the first to look out the window. Drawing was something very foreign to him. The other 5 members of Young Master's elite followed suit, for this task depended too much on a skill set they did not have. Bluey's and Sakurazaka Mooney had no words, either, as Fireball answered stiltedly, "I might be able to do it if the subject's a lady." All eyes finally fell on the 2 ladies. Everybody felt that since there were no other candidates, perhaps the ladies would be able to do something about it. "I can't do it. I don't know how to draw," Svelte Dancer blurted out as everyone stared at her. "Perhaps, any of you is able to accurately describe them out and let me do the drawing." The person who had first suggested this offered his service. The man was evidently skilled at drawing, which was why he had brought up the idea. "Describe." Gufei stared out the window once more. They were looking for someone who could put words to what they witnessed before, and now they wanted someone whose words could paint a picture. Today's scenery outside sure was very captivating. Chapter 565, The Need to Cure Protagonist Syndrome. Aside from Gufei standing by the window, admiring the scenery outside, the other 10 players were all chipping in all over as they tried to describe the looks of Southern Lone Blade and his team. Every adjective drifted into Gufei's ears, yet he was entirely unable to make out the face in his mind. However, he saw how the players brush danced, occasionally asking a question or two as he exuded an air of professionalism while at work. Half an hour later, this person announced the completion of his work, and several people behind him squeezed to take a look, each of them ending up dumbfounded. Bluey started right over, snatching that man's drawing paper, "To have a look, fuck your granddad." "What is this? The Calabash Brothers?" Bluey's did not pass the drawing to others. Instead, he crumbled the paper into a ball and tossed it right at that man. That man was miserable. "What? Is that not how they look?" "How they look, my foot." "Posing as an artist, get out of my sight." Bluey's bearded. "Damn, how do they not look alike?" the man muttered, smoothing out his drawing and passing it to Sword Demon and the others. Their group just so happened to be curious of what had been drawn, so they quickly craned their necks to take a look. They immediately admired this man's courage when they saw the drawing, for it was no longer a question of likeness but rather a question of the man's ability to draw in the first place. To volunteer gutsily for this task despite his lousy capability, his bravery was really commendable. "Fuck, stop disgracing yourself." Bluey's immediately felt ashamed for his comrade. Lunging over and shredding the drawing into pieces like a starving tiger, He even looked as if he regretted being unable to swallow each piece afterward. So, that's not gonna work, yeah? Gufei, who had been looking out the window this whole time, was now gloating. If most of these people were unable to identify Southern Lone Blade, that naturally meant that it was impossible for them to leverage on their numerical superiority and bully the less, so it was better to just lure them out like what he had done before. Unfortunately, young Master Han quickly shattered this dream of his. Even if we can't do it this way, your method won't ever work, either. What do you take Southern Lone Blade for, a fool? Do you think that he'll still fall for your ploy when he already knows of it? You can't really say that, as he did really go through with the deed in the end last night. Our intentions last night were telegraphed openly, yet he still dared to make a move. Don't look down on Southern Lone Blade, that man's really ballsy. Aside from me, I don't really know if he fears anyone else, Gufei invalidated. Quite a number of players in this tavern had no idea who Gufei was, so they all stared at the man, thinking how shameless he was, when they heard him toot his horns so loudly. Sword Demon and rest of Young Master's elite knew the truth of that statement, whilst Felt Dancer and the others knew that they were no empty words after what they had experienced last night. When Gufei was around, they saw not a soul even as they walked about in those 2 hours. However, in the few minutes that Gufei was gone, that team of larcenists immediately sprang into action. The original trap they had set was actually all for show, since both parties were well aware what the other was doing. At the end of the day, it was nothing more than a game of cat and mouse between Southern Lone Blade's team and Gufei. That was yesterday. Today is today. If they find out your use of Windchaser's emblem to teleport nearby instantly, do you really think that they'll still attack? Young Master Han asked. Which is why we need to make some adjustments today. We won't be using the Windchaser's emblem but a teleportation scroll. Instead, I'll make sure to be far away, while you guys will lure them to a set of coordinates we choose prior to the ambush. I'll teleport back the moment they show themselves, Gufei replied. Changing the form but not the content, you're still relying on teleportation at the end of the day. Considering what you've done yesterday, why would Southern Lone Blade not be on his guard against it? Teleportation scrolls are something everybody knows about, so he's bound to think of it as well. Young Master Han rejected still. But he's still gotta act. Gufei said. Of course, he will, but since he's so afraid of you, he can just wait until he's certain that you're not around before he attacks. Are you telling me that you're able to use the teleportation scroll from your bed and directly teleport yourself right into the game? Gufei really had no comeback this time. The limited time he had playing this game was a solid fact. Meanwhile, players like Vastlushness would of course be unable to do what he did of playing a mere 3 hours every day. That is why, from here onward, if you really want to take down Southern Lone Blade, the only method you have will require you to look for him by your volition. If you really want him to make the first move, it'll only be when you're offline. Why don't you take a shower and go to sleep right now? Young Master Han asked. You made matters sound so contradictory when you put it like that. Gufei was very dejected. Then, what do you suggest? Bluey's was annoyed as well. According to what young Master Han had said, there was no way that they could passively draw Southern Lone Blade and his team out. Conversely, they simply did not have sufficient manpower to take the initiative. Would there ever be a resolution to this whole affair? Actually, there's a very simple solution that will solve this once and for all. I just don't know if you're willing to do it. Young Master Han suddenly addressed Vastlushness. What is it? Vastlushness asked. Abandon the staff, young Master Han replied matter-of-factly. Fuck. The crowd cursed in derision. Equipment and skills were the two things MMOs depended on. Why not just directly delete the account if the solution was tossing out a piece of equipment over such matter? In the clamor that resounded, Vastlushness instead appeared to have realized something as she gazed at young Master Han. What you mean to say? That's right. Don't just toss it out on the street but toss it to someone, young Master Han affirmed. The entire tavern became really quiet very quickly. A crude and simple solution, but it would no doubt be very effective. However, it would also touch upon the Achilles heel of players in MMOs, the issue of trust. No one in the tavern spoke a word. While a good majority of them had no idea what this magic staff was, The fact that it could instigate someone to pay good money to rob it offer surely meant that it was a rare item in parallel world. The whole lot of them gathering here in this tavern was ultimately to protect this very piece of equipment. Would Vastlushness agree to hand it over to someone else just like this? A number of players were staring fixedly at Vastlushness, while the remaining players all did the same to Gufei. That someone that young Master Han had mentioned was obviously referring to Gufei. It was just that this was simply too sensitive a situation. If Vastlushness rejected it, then that would imply a lack of trust, and it would make things inevitably awkward between the two. In order to avoid this sort of awkwardness, it would be best if Gufei made the move to reject this suggestion, especially now that Vastlushness had expressed her reluctance to the matter. Vastlushness' reluctance here was unavoidable. After all, she was not particularly familiar with Gufei at the end of the day. However, as everyone waited for Gufei to defuse the situation, the man, instead, slapped the table in a show of approval. "That's a great idea." Everybody figuratively fainted over when they heard this. The more devious players felt that Gufei was being a wolf with a savage heart, while those not as dark-hearted felt that Gufei simply had no idea how he should be acting when it came to such matters. Vastlushness, however, burst into laughter when she saw how Gufei looked. Nodding her head without a trace of hesitation, she agreed. "Indeed, that isn't a bad idea." With that, she took out her magic staff, ready to hand it over to Gufei. People had a hard time grasping Gufei's deftness and skill, but his character was pretty much an open book. The reason Vastlushness had hesitated that moment was because she was recalling the tumultuous history they shared. In truth, handing over a piece of equipment did not actually depend on the closeness of the relationship between the two but rather the conduct and behavior of the receiving party. Silver Moon was close to her, but what had happened in the end? She and Gufei were strangers, and even started out as enemies, yet he would lend a hand time and again whenever she was in trouble. This kind of person, whether a friend or otherwise, would always have the conduct of someone dependable. Thinking up to this point, Vastlushness no longer had a shred of doubt when she handed over the magic staff to Gufei. "Wait a minute." Young Master Han suddenly stopped them. "What now?" Gufei asked. "What's the point of doing it now? This handing over should be done for Southern Lone Blade to see," young Master Han replied. "There's no need for that," Vastlushness said plainly. "It's not too bad if they end up wasting their effort, only to discover that the staff isn't on me. Why not just give it to me? I'm still waiting for a chance to take my revenge on him." Svelte Dancer suddenly leapt to her feet. "Shoo! What has this got to do with you?" Gufei waved his hand dismissively. "Lushness, give it to me." Svelte Dancer ignored him and directly implored for Vastlushness to give her the item. This time, Vastlushness was in more of a quandary than before. Either wanted the staff, so who should she give it to? "What are you squabbling over for? What's the point of handing it over right now? If Southern Lone Blade doesn't witness the handoff with his eyes, do you expect me to run off and tell him who the magic staff ends up with?" Young Master Han scoffed. "There's no need for you to run and tell him, I have him on my friends list," Brother Assist interjected. "You're a real comedian." Young Master Han's voice dripped with sarcasm as he expressionlessly gazed at Brother Assist. "How are we gonna let him witness this? If we can let him see this, why don't we just directly slay that man, instead?" Gufei asked. "It's very simple, head over to the auction house and register it for a day. Afterward, everyone should spread the word about it all over the city." "He'll soon learn of it," answered young Master Han. "But the auction house will only show the price of the auction and not the buyer's name," Brother Assist mentioned. "Such a minor detail isn't going to be too difficult for a talented professional like Southern Lone Blade, right?" "Think about the transaction process of an auction," young Master Han said. "It is first placed for auction and bid over. When the time is up, the goods can be retrieved," Brother Assist said. "That's right. The time duration of the auction is depicted as clear as day on the auction panel, which means anyone can find out what time the player will retrieve the said item. In order to find out who buys the magic staff, Southern Lone Blade is bound to keep an eye on the distribution NPC when it's time to retrieve the item and takes note of who ends up becoming the owner of the equipment," young Master Han explained further. "Oh, that makes sense." Brother Assist nodded. "At this rate, once Southern Lone Blade sees that the magic staff is in my hands, he can come looking for me to get a hold of it." Goofy nodded as well. Who said it's gonna be yours? I'll be the one holding on to it. Svelte Dancer contradicted. No, it's me. Goofy insisted. However, Svelte Dancer smiled. Unfortunately, there's no way that I am going to lose to you this time. Goofy paused for a moment before realizing what she meant. Tears streamed down his cheeks as a corollary. The place they were putting the magic staff was the auction house, and it only recognized cold hard cash. Even though Vast Lushness would end up returning every coin back to the owner at the end of this situation, the rule of the auction house made it such that the highest bidder would be the final owner of the staff. If Svelte Dancer had her eye on this magic staff, would there really be anyone out there who could fight with her in possessing the magic staff in a venue like the auction house? Seeing how determined Svelte Dancer looked, Goofy had no choice but to admit defeat. In the end, it was young Master Han who sighed deeply. Like I've said before, does it really matter who ends up holding the magic staff? Of course. The two answered in unison. It might matter for anyone else, but it definitely cannot be either of you. Young Master Han shook his head. What do you mean? The two were confused. Comrades, since Southern Lone Blade will surely be at the auction house to find out who the buyer is, why don't we take this chance to simply kill him off? Why must we frolic right in front of him with the magic staff in hand and wait for him to locate you again? Young Master Han asked. Huh? The two were stunned. This is a plan to lure out Southern Lone Blade in the open through the use of the trade panel. There's absolutely no need for either of you to do anything. Constantly treating yourselves as the protagonist, the two of you had better get yourselves cured from your protagonist syndrome. Young Master Han said. Chapter 566, Auctioning the Magic Staff. The tavern instantly became quiet once more. The more quick-witted players realized that from the moment young Master Han mentioned toss the magic staff to someone, this someone really meant anyone. There was no particular person he was referring to. In the end, they were the ones who had assumed that young Master Han was talking about giving it to Goofy, whom Southern Lone Blade was afraid of, for safekeeping. As a result, Goofy also believed it to be the truth and thought that that was what young Master Han meant. Now that young Master Han had explained it more plainly, sure enough, it really did not matter who ended up completing the final transaction and becoming the final owner of the staff. But it could never be either Goofy or Svelte Dancer. That was because Southern Lone Blade would easily recognize either of them and would connect them to Vast Lushness. How would Southern Lone Blade's team not suspect that something was afoot if they saw them run to the auction house to purchase Vast Lushness's magic staff? That was why it would be better for an unfamiliar face to participate in the transaction. Previously, players who could recognize Southern Lone Blade would be considered as a talent. However, in the blink of an eye, those who could recognize him were all rendered useless. Instead, it was those who were unfamiliar with the team of 7 that emerged as the talents this time round. That was why it was said, there must be a purpose for my abilities since heaven made me. Everyone could not speak for a moment, as they deliberated over the feasibility of this plan. Ultimately, it was the holder of the magic staff, Vast Lushness, who spoke up. It's worth a shot. Young Master Han nodded. Randomly find someone whom you can trust afterward and get everyone to pool a large sum in his care to buy the staff from you. Vast Lushness nodded. Finding someone whom she could trust to do this sort of thing was not particularly difficult. Among the men with blue eyes, quite a number were the comrades she once had when past deeds was still dominating Y City. Even though everyone had parted ways after everything fell apart, their friendship had remained intact. Finding a priest from within this crowd to accomplish this task was more than appropriate. There's no rush in picking out the person to do the deed. The first thing we need to do is put the magic staff up for auction. Once that is done, you can have everyone that isn't busy to visit taverns and similar gathering spots to spread the news. Information about any piece of top-grade equipment would always spread quickly, young Master Han said. Yes. Plenty of people nodded, ready to go about the work that they were tasked with. Bluey's was utterly crushed when he saw this, brooding over how this reprobate had no reservations to act like he was one of them as he ordered his brothers in arms so impudently. What made it all the more infuriating was how his men had actually gone along with it so readily. Bluey's had never seen them so well behaved before. Then, I'll go and put my staff up for auction now. Vast Lushness got up and said she was still in danger of being ambushed by Southern Lone Blade if she went and did this alone, so she left for the auction house under the escort of another pack of players. Vast Lushness was somewhat at a loss as to whether she should laugh or cry, for this was as extravagant as back when she was in Y City, where she used to have a whole host of players tagging along just for a shopping trip down the street. Over at the auction house, Vast Lushness placed her utopian magic staff up for auction. She set the starting bid at 1800 gold coins, 200 gold coins lower than the 2000 gold coins Brother Assist and those veteran experts had evaluated, to give off this idea that she was in a hurry to get it off her hands. However, if she was in a hurry to get rid of it, she should still set a cap for it as well. Directly putting the item at the buyout price of 1800 gold coins would make the transaction appear to be far more straightforward, but she did not dare to do so, for she was afraid that someone else would buy it off. Instead, she was unwilling to set the cap to be higher as well, because given how large the world was, there was bound to be a lot of idiots out there with money to spare. In the end, the final impression she gave off was of someone who urgently wanted to get rid of the staff yet was somewhat unwilling to part with it. "It's done." Vast Lushness turned back and told the lot of players behind her after she was done with using the auction panel. 24 hours, right? Young Master Han asked. "Yup. It's now 7:37 p.m. Everyone should meet up at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow to make the necessary arrangements," young Master Han announced. "Yes." Everybody nodded. "Now, let's quickly go around and spread the news. Don't appear to be too deliberate." Young Master Han waved his hand to the crowd. Half the people present departed, and Bluey's felt despondent for a moment. He planned to hammer a proper ideology lesson into this bunch of rascals once this was over, so they would be deeply aware just who their boss was. Bluey's bunch of impatient comrades were very efficient when it came to executing their tasks. As the news of a top-grade magic staff for priest winding up in the auction house slowly began to travel around Beishi City. When it came to disseminating such information, all that was needed was to get it started, and further proliferation would occur through the professional gossip mongers that loved to spread such tidbits. Soon, quite a few priests heard the news and ran over to the auction house to take a gander. The utopian magic staff was of course no white elephant. Its stats were just a little bit stronger than the magic staff most of the priests were currently using, and then there was that inlaid skill mana sacrifice, which could be seen as a method of recovering mana if anyone were to put it plainly. Priests were only able to recover HP right now, so with that magic staff at hand, not only would they be able to help their allies recover HP, they could even provide mana. How cool would that be? It was a well-established fact that running out of mana during crucial moments would be as good as a death sentence for most job classes. The 1,800 gold coin price tag was enough to stop the more average players in their tracks, but those who were attuned to such business knew that the staff was already considered as a steal at that price. They would definitely earn themselves a tidy profit if they managed to purchase the item at that price, but upon seeing how many other priests were gathered here at the auction house for it, everyone could more or less guess their reason for being here. Thus, those that did not have sufficient funds could only salivate as they stared at the magic staff, whereas those that had the money in their pockets were in no rush to begin bidding after they saw how many potential competitors were present. Since there was no price cap for this item, placing their bids right now would be utterly meaningless. It was better to wait at the 24 hours until it got to the final 10 minutes, or even the final minute, for that would be when the competition would be the most intense. Players who understood this made note of the time and turned to leave. Rather than wasting their time standing around here, it made more sense to gather the funds they needed during this time. Looking at the speed at which this matter escalated, perhaps even 3,000 gold coins might not be sufficient to secure the staff. No, it could even reach 4,000, 5,000. Those priests that had walked out the auction house could feel their pessimism set in as they watched other priests come running to the establishment from every corner of the street. This was the true value of a piece of top-grade equipment. Everyone would be able to assess an item's market price going by the stats and traits an item hold, but the key characteristic of a top-grade equipment was in its rarity, and the resulting bidding war that it would create. There was no way anybody could predict the final price such an item would end up being sold for. The same utopian magic staff could perhaps be sold for 3,000 gold coins this time, but it might well be 5,000 gold coins the next time around. Because there were so few of them, the scarcity made it such that it was impossible for it to form any fixed market of supply and demand. It could be considered as a new market every time a new utopian magic staff appeared. So what sort of market price could there really be for it? Market price was really no more than just a term players used, and it would mean something different for different things. To a common piece of equipment, the market price would be understood as the highest price for the said item, but to an actual piece of top-grade equipment like the utopian magic staff, the market price would represent the lowest starting price it could be bought at. At the moment, there were plenty of priests heading to the auction house to take a look at this equipment. Some lingered about after they saw it, while others hurried to begin raising the coins they needed for the purchase. The players that were consequently impacted by this were those teams grinding levels in the wild, discovering a dearth of available priests that night. Over at the city gates, where most teams would usually be gathering their party members before they headed out into the wild to grind, the players of such parties were all left dumbfounded. All of them were unable to set off to do their level grinding as they suddenly found their parties without their priests. What's going on? The leaders of these grinding parties inquired after this phenomenon, naturally contributing to yet another round of information circulation. There's a top-grade priest magic staff being auctioned in the auction house called Utopian Magic Staff. It has an inlaid skill that replenishes mana. This message quickly made its rounds in Beishi City. Utopian Magic Staff? Yizia, and Broken Water Arrow were in a tavern when they heard this news. What? Broken Water Arrow had no idea that Silver Moon had encouraged Yizia to purchase this particular magic staff. This staff has the inlaid skill called Mana Sacrifice. It's a skill that replenishes mana to a target player. Presently, such skill that replenishes mana is few and in between, Yixiao explained. Sounds very useful, Broken Water Arrow commented. Very much so, Yixiao said. Should we go take a look? Let's go. The two set off for the auction house together. It had been 3 hours since Gufeo logged off, and it was well in the deep of the night, yet there were still quite a number of priests present in the auction house. Priests already numbered in the tens of thousands in a city, and the unending series of players who received this information kept making their way over. Never had the auction house here in Beishi City ever seen such a lively scene since the game's inception. There were plenty of auction consoles in the building, yet not one of them was free for use at the moment, as each had a crowd of priests surrounding them. Yizia and Broken Water Arrow exchanged glances, picking out a console with fewer players around it as they did their best to squeeze their way in. On the auction panel, they saw the Utopian Magic Staff listed right on top. While a majority of the players were calmly waiting for the final moment tomorrow before they set their bids, there were many others who casually put their bid for it at the moment. As a result, the price had already leapt to 2,217 gold, 58 silver, and 40 copper coins. There were rules to the bidding of auction items, and the lowest increment was at 10 copper coins per bid, without an upper cap to each bid. However, once someone bid over 10 copper coins, the lowest increment per bid would be refreshed accordingly. By the time Yizia took note of the latest bid, he saw that the bids were already raised to 1 gold coin. It was in that moment that the price jumped once more, bringing the price for the Utopian Magic Staff to 2,218 gold, 58 silver and 40 copper coins. Looks like this isn't going to be easy. Broken Water Arrow saw the throng mob of priests around them and commented while wiping sweat off his forehead. Yeah, seeing how this is going, it's no longer just a question of having the funds, but a bit of luck will also be required, Yizia said. Hee, not necessarily. If you were to raise the bid by 10,000 right there, I'm sure no one else would seek to raise by another 10,000. Broken Water Arrow chuckled. There's no need for that, Yixiao laughed as well. I've already ordered one for 4,000 gold coins. Oh, where from? Broken Water Arrow asked. Silvermoon is helping me contact the seller, Yixiao replied. Can we trust that scamp? Why not? Can he even produce a fake item to fool me? Yixiao laughed dismissively. At most, he might be able to earn a few hundred gold coins being the middleman for this transaction. Still, look, even if he does benefit from this, 4,000 gold coins can still be considered as cheap. If the bidding continues like this, do you doubt that it will go beyond 4,000 gold coins? There's no doubt that it will. Broken Water Arrow was about to say more, but his eyes caught sight of the seller's name at this point, and he was immediately startled. Vast Lushness. Isn't that the wifey of Silver Moon back in the days? Oh? Yi Xiao immediately took note of the name and proceeded to mutter, could this be the person he is helping me contract? I don't think so. I heard that the two of them had quite an ugly breakup. There's no way that that lady is gonna sell that item to him. Broken Water Arrow replied. Let me ask him. How many of these staves are there in this game now? Broken Water Arrow asked. How would I know the exact number? Yi Xiao asked back even as he sent Silver Moon a message. The utopian magic staff that you're helping me acquire. Does it belong to Vast Lushness? Silver Moon was currently grinding his level out in the wild all by himself. Every minute he stayed in Beishi City had him feeling frightened out of his wits, much less places like taverns where there were plenty of players around. That was why he had quickly run out into the wilds when nothing was happening. He specifically sought out the maps where barely anyone was at to arduously grind all by himself. He had no clue about the news of the magic staff going around the city. Receiving Yi Xiao's message so suddenly, Silver Moon felt his heart lurch, and the first thought he had was that Southern Lone Blade had utterly betrayed him, telling Fleeting Smile everything despite having promised not to. However, that was just a thought. Seeing this message, Silver Moon was not about to confess without being pressed as he gave his reply. Huh? It was a single word with the appropriate punctuation, yet it was extremely vague. He did not directly admit to what Yi Xiao was asking, nor did he deny it outright. That one-word answer revealed a sense of cluelessness, a cue for the other party to continue. A utopian magic staff has appeared in the auction house, and the seller is Vast Lushness. As expected, Yi Xiao indeed spilled out the whole story succinctly. He only suspected that Silver Moon was hoping to earn a commission worth about a few hundred gold coins when he persuaded him of acquiring the staff. Never would Yi Xiao guess that Silver Moon had actually found players to rob someone he had once been fairly close with. Ah, yes. That's the one. Why did that woman go back on her word? She clearly agreed to sell it to me. Silver Moon faked his anger over the matter, forcing the blame onto Vast Lushness yet again. In that moment, he came up with a very fiendish idea once more. In Silver Moon's eyes, Yi Xiao was without a doubt a very wealthy player. Once he found out that this magic staff was the very same one, he should be more than capable of making the purchase of the item over by the auction house. Meanwhile, over by Southern Lone Blade's end, even though the man had removed Silver Moon's name from his friends list, Silver Moon had fortunately managed to add Glue as a friend along with the 4 others when they met yesterday. Upon contacting Glue afterward, Silver Moon found out that even though Southern Lone Blade had removed him from his friends list, his professionalism meant that he would still complete the assignment he had been tasked with, otherwise, the indemnity clause would kick in as per the conditions of their agreement. Silver Moon was well aware of the rules Southern Lone Blade's team went by. Taking the deposit was as good as accepting the assignment, so if the employer wished to cancel the assignment, the deposit would not be refunded. But if it was Southern Lone Blade's team that decided to cancel the assignment, they would have to refund double the deposit that they were given. Now that the magic staff had been auctioned, it was not difficult to find out who the eventual buyer would be. Southern Lone Blade and the others would of course have to find out who this person was, and the moment they discovered the buyer to be Fleeting Smile. If he cancels the assignment, I learn 2,000 gold coins for nothing. If he continues the assignment, I don't give a damn if they end up killing Yi Xiao as well. It was with such an idea in mind that Silver Moon admitted that the magic staff was one and the same. If that's the case, Yi Xiao answered, not saying anything further. Silver Moon felt that there was no need for him to coax the man any further. The only thing he was afraid of was Southern Lone Blade's team being unaware that the magic staff had been placed on auction, so he quickly reached out to Glue. Vast Lushness's magic staff has been put up for bidding in the auction house. Do you know that? Silver Moon asked. Is there such a thing? I have no idea. Glue replied. Better keep your eye on it, then. Otherwise, things are gonna be troublesome if we have no idea who the item ends up with, Silver Moon said. Fuck. Just as he sent that message out, Silver Moon suddenly came to a realization and viciously slapped himself on the mouth. It would have been so much better if Southern Lone Blade and his team had no idea where the magic staff ended up. Since they would be unable to locate it at that time, they would of course be unable to complete the assignment. Would that not mean that they would have to pay out twice the deposit as well? That was his goal from the very start, right? Why would he even care to remind them about it? Fuck. Silver Moon slapped himself twice more after that. Chapter 567, Is This a Trap? While Silver Moon continued to slap himself in deep remorse, Southern Lone Blade, who had just heard the news from Glue, immediately furrowed his brows. Ever since their debut, Southern Lone Blade and his men had only ever imagined such a situation happening, but they had never truly experienced it before. Because they were worried about such a matter occurring, they had always been very careful of their true objective getting revealed. However, this time, due to Southern Lone Blade's team coming across Gufei, an enemy who knew them well, they ended up getting exposed in totality, such that Vast Lushness very quickly surmised that the only item worth looting off her was that magic staff she owned. What should they do in such a situation? Southern Lone Blade and the others once had a serious discussion about this, and they concluded that it would be very troublesome, so they decided that their best bet was to prevent such a problematic scenario from even happening. Furthermore, thinking that they were dealing with top-grade equipment here, they reckoned most people might not be so resolute as to directly give up like this, which was also why they had not been particularly worried about such an eventuality. Alas, right now, they had not expected that a woman like Vast Lushness would be so daring and unwavering to abandon her top-grade equipment just like that. What do we do now? Everyone turned to look at Southern Lone Blade. Evidently, this team of 7 had far better cohesion than Bluey's men. Each member turned to their boss when faced with a problem. We've already gotten his deposit, and even though Silver Moon is a trash bag, what makes me all the more unwilling to give up is the fact that I must pay him back double his deposit if we abandon the assignment right here. Southern Lone Blade spat. Yeah. Everybody agreed wholeheartedly. Southern Lone Blade had told the others about Silver Moon once they returned, and all were unified in their anger and indignance toward him. Their pride was wounded given how the man had actually doubted their team's professionalism. Let's head over to the auction house first to take a look, Flame-Singed Clothes suggested. Wait. Southern Lone Blade suddenly paused, causing everyone to turn their attention to him. Southern Lone Blade nodded his head. The 7 headed back to the city from the grinding map they were in, and along the way, they discovered that there were fewer players out grinding in the various grinding maps today. As they wondered about this, completely lost as to why this was the case, they finally made it to the city gates of Beishi City. It was already midnight now, yet the city gates were surprisingly crowded. It was apparent that something unusual was happening in Beishi City, but as the 7 of them took note of these people around them, they soon realized that they were all just unaffiliated players looking to party up and do some level grinding. Such a situation rarely ever happened, because unaffiliated players did not know each other. If they did not have enough members, they could simply merge 2 parties into one, 3 into 2. Essentially, the problems they faced were easily solved, so there was no need for them to wait too long to form up a proper party. However, right now, there were just so many parties left high and dry out here. Southern Lone Blade and the others carefully observed these players yet again and finally saw that every party present lacked priests. Bro, what's going on here? Glue went forward to a nearby player to inquire after the situation. Damn it. I heard that there's a top-grade priest magic staff placed for bidding in the auction house. All the priests have ran over there. It's fine if they have the money to make a bid, but taking a glimpse of it is more than enough. If that's not the case, what's the point of those priests gathering themselves over there, anyway? This person was complaining endlessly. Is that so? How long have you guys been waiting here? Glue asked. Almost half an hour now. Motherfucker. There are still plenty of parties ahead, too. Glue took another look around him after hearing this and realized that every party present had actually lined themselves up properly, probably in an effort to coax the priests that might appear. This was why everybody had harmoniously lined their parties up. For every priest that arrived, a party would leave. Today was not the day to have the unreasonable dream of having 2 priests in a party. Glue turned to share this information with Southern Lone Blade and the rest. but he instead discovered that they were already mired in a fracas on their end. The players waiting by the city gate for priests to appear were barely able to contain themselves when the two priests Patty St. Pastures and Verdant Timber appeared. The two were immediately surrounded and wrangled by these parties. Before either could say a word, the other players already started squabbling for them. "Fuck, what are you snatching for? Haven't we agreed to queue in order?" Someone shouted. "Damn, there are two priests here, so the two parties can get one each. Are you trying to steal them both? Even if there's only one, it isn't your turn for it. It's our turn." "No, ours. It was fine if priests trickled in one by one as everybody could still maintain a semblance of discipline, but the moment two priests appeared together at once, the situation quickly descended into an uproar. Patty Scented Pastures and Verdant Timber had experienced all sorts of situations, but this was actually a first for them. The two men were delighted being fought over by all these players, and neither made any effort to speak up for a good moment. Finally, it was still Southern Lone Blade who stepped forward. "Gentlemen, please calm down. We're a fixed team." "Hey, man, you've only got 6 members in your team. 2 priests is just too much of a luxury. Mind if you yield one to us?" Someone identified Southern Lone Blade to be the leader of the group, so he swiftly came over to negotiate. "Yield? What a joke. Bro, we'll hire one of your priests. 50 gold coins an hour." Southern Lone Blade did not know whether he should cry or laugh. "We've got something on. What could be more important than level grinding?" These people were unwilling to relent. They were all done foolishly waiting for priests. Some even approached Patty Scented Pastures and Verdant Timber directly. "Brothers, I see that the level of the team you're running with isn't too high. Some of them haven't even reached level 40 yet. What's the point of following them? Come join us, instead. We are a 10-man party, and all are level 41 to boot. You'll see your experience bar steadily surge upwards." Neither priest said a word, continuing to enjoy this royalty treatment, even as they glanced at Blackwater and Flame-Cinched Clothes that were standing beside them. They were the two noobs who had yet to reach level 40 these surrounding players were talking about and treating like a bad joke. "Say something, you two bastards!" Southern Lone Blade yelled at the two over the party channel, incensed when he saw the two only staying silent at such a crucial moment. They no longer had the audacity to drag this matter any further and quickly explained to the players surrounding them. "We're busy. Really busy." Now that the players themselves had spoken, the players around tried to make a few more attempts to further persuade them but ultimately dispersed and left them alone once it was clear that they would still be rejected. Southern Lone Blade and the others did not dare to dawdle as they rushed away from that place, which treated priests like precious treasures. "Damn it, isn't it just a top-grade magic staff being auctioned? Is there a need for all the priests in the city to get into such a tizzy?" Flame-Cinched Clothes' heart shuddered as he said this. The whole lot of men just now had tried to curry favor with Patty Scented Pastures and Verdant Timber, while he, a mage that was not even at level 40, had been thoroughly ignored. Some of the players casually slapped him about, with some of the more strength-oriented players being a little heavy-handed. Flame-Cinched Clothes felt lucky that he had not been slapped to death by all those hands. Top-grade equipment is truly priceless. Blackwater sighed in awe. Even Southern Lone Blade nodded. "And this is that magic staff that Vast Lushness has. Imagine if its 1,000 miles drunk's sword with its unknown traits, or even that scumbag Silver Moon's King's Blade, how much of an uproar do you think that would cause?" Hee. "We've chosen the right line of work, gentlemen. We've really got a bright future ahead of us." Glue said. "Oh, yes." The row of 7 men cried tears of joy, proud of themselves for having chosen the life of larceny. The auction house is just ahead. The 7 of them were finally nearing the auction house. While Southern Lone Blade and his team were busy getting themselves out of trouble, Glue had already gathered information about the situation with the magic staff and confirmed it to be the utopian magic staff that they were after. He also found out about the duration of the auction, as well as the fact that the item had no price cap. The priests at the auction house were naturally there to take a look at the stats of the staff, as well as its price, neither of which Southern Lone Blade's gang was interested in. Now that they were near the establishment, what the 7 were more concerned with was the layout of the area around the place. "This is a trap." On the way over, Southern Lone Blade suddenly threw out this possibility. "A trap?" The six furrowed their brows. No matter how I look at it, this magic staff is simply causing far too much a stir. A 24-hour auction, and it's only been 7 hours since it was first listed. For it to take the city by storm that even the unaffiliated teams have trouble finding a priest. Don't you think that this is a little exaggerated? Southern Lone Blade asked. It may be 7 hours now, but I heard that priests have begun to get anxious around 10 p.m. last night, Glue chipped in. That only highlights the problem even further. In just a span of 2 hours, the news of the item had already spread so far and wide. I do believe someone must be intentionally causing this, don't you? Southern Lone Blade asked. That isn't exactly difficult to explain away, though. Take the seller as an example. It makes sense for her to spread the news as best as she can to let more people be aware of it, Flame-Cinched Clothes considered. Yes, I heard that even a post of it appeared on the forums, Glue added. I know that's a possibility, but considering the relationship the seller has with us, we ought to be all the more wary of it, Southern Lone Blade reasoned. What do you mean? There are two possibilities, Southern Lone Blade raised his finger. First, if the whole city knows, there's no reason we will not know. Vast Lushness is using this situation to send a message to us, informing us that she no longer holds the magic staff, so we should stop looking for her. Everyone nodded. That would be fine if that's the case. What's problematic is if this is a trap within a trap. If we understand that there's such a possibility, then we will need to find out just who ends up owning that magic staff. As a result, we will have to keep watch over the NPC in charge of handling the goods over at the auction house. Since this is a necessity on our part, that will give our enemies a chance to ambush us. That is the second possibility that we need to be worried about, Southern Lone Blade said. Who's gonna plan things out to such lengths, though? I don't know. The scariest part of this scheme is that although we suspect that there's a trap set for us here, we have no choice but to go with the plan and act accordingly. This schemer has homed in on the fact that we might not be willing to risk the possibility of failing in our assignment, Southern Lone Blade replied. Hey, this is all just conjecture. Can you not say it as if it's a fact? Glue said. Southern Lone Blade chuckled bitterly. That's precisely the skepticism the schemer is trying to sow in us. It'd be great if it's all just hot air. Then, what are we going to do? Won't we be in danger if we head over to take a look now? Glue asked. We're not going in. Let's observe the situation from somewhere nearby first, Southern Lone Blade decided. At the moment, the 7 of them were already close to where the auction house was, and they walked around the many streets and alleys around the area once over. I've yet to see anything strange. They were all veterans when it came to staking out targets, and ambushes were their strong suits as well. After finishing walking that one round, all they saw were priests running about, and there was nothing else out of the ordinary. The terrain here in the heart of the city is wide and open, with plenty of people in various streets and alleys. The most important aspect of ambushing someone here will be the manpower. It'll take a level 4 guild or above to completely seal this area up. There are so many different streets here, how are they going to guard them all? This was the conclusion Glue came to after he finished his observation. Chapter 568, Prepare for the operation. It is impossible under normal circumstances, but what if 1,000 miles drunks around? Flame-Cinched Clothes asked. Southern Lone Blade glanced at him. Out of the 7, he was the one who was most afraid of Goofy. It was most likely because he shared the same job class as that man, so just from comparing himself to the man, he already had a hard time figuratively lifting his head off the ground. Southern Lone Blade patted him and said, 1,000 miles drunk is but one man. Just one of him is able to match with all 7 of us. Flame-Cinched Clothes countered. No, what I mean to say is that we can split up and flee. Southern Lone Blade felt that he should retract what he had thought moments before. Flame-Cinched Clothes was not as frightened of Goofy as he had thought, for he was still thinking about taking him on. It was Southern Lone Blade himself whose first thought was to swiftly make their separate escapes. But they still have other strengths. There's a good possibility that we fail to escape by splitting up, Glue said. Which is why we need to make some sacrifices to stall 1,000 miles drunk, Southern Lone Blade said. Blackwater and Flame-Singed Clothes stood out with decisive resolve. The two of them were not even level 40, so the loss from their sacrifice would be relatively small. Southern Lone Blade's party of 7 was a true team in every sense of the word. Each of them had absolute faith in the team, and only the strength of the team as a whole mattered. The other 5 were not about to be courteous with the two, but they still expressed their gratitude and were moved by the two's action. Deep down, they could not bear with this reality, but this was something they had no choice over. If it were not for the necessity, would any of them need to do something as brutal as sacrificing themselves? The 7 were solemn, as if they were observing the memorial service in advance for Blackwater and Flame-Singed Clothes before they made their move. That was when Glue suddenly thought of something, and that expression of distress abruptly gave way for one of glee as he happily cried out, "I've got an idea." "What idea?" "A marvelous idea." Glue was elated. The topic of the magic staff continued to dominate the conversation of Beishi City, even as it made its rounds over to the forums. Priests from other cities even made the long trek over to Beishi City for it. The very fact that they braved the distance alone was a testament to the determination these priests had to acquire the item. This dealt quite a blow to the priests in Beishi City, as what had been a city-wide competition for the utopian magic staff instantaneously became a worldwide struggle. The price for the magic staff climbed unceasingly to dizzying heights as time passed. Vast Lushness and the rest went to have a look at the auction house after an overnight grinding session, only to find out that the price had risen up to 3,424 gold, 58 silver, and 40 copper coins, and the increment bid limit had risen to 50 gold coins. For an item's price to reach such levels, there was no doubt that this was a never-before-seen bidding war to purchase this item. After all, the period when the real bidding would begin had yet to arrive. These were nothing more than the bids that were tossed out in passing, yet all this probing had already raised it to such a sum. All this only made the final price all the more unimaginable. Motherfucker. Now that's what I call a piece of real top-grade equipment. Sakura Sakamuni exclaimed in awe. As the self-proclaimed #1 trap expert of Yunjuan City, he called plenty of the hunter gear he had on him as top-grade equipment, yet there was no way they could compete with the utopian magic staff. To give the simplest example, if anyone searched for the utopian magic staff in the auction panel available on the premise, only a single result would be shown. But if anybody keyed any of the names of the pieces of top-grade equipment Sakura Sakamuni had on him, the results would fill many pages. We should not call it top-grade equipment, it should be called exceptional equipment, instead, Fireball commented. That's a good way to put it, Sakura Sakamuni agreed. The man glanced over to Vast Lushness, who had been standing beside him, only to see the lady's eyes looking somewhat vacant. He reached out and waved his hands before her eyes. "Hey, you're not tempted to really sell it off, are you? Selling such exceptional and peerless top-grade equipment and using the profits to outfit herself with more typical top-grade equipment would surely see a significant boost to a character's combat power. Plenty of players who emphasized on maximizing their experience gain would definitely make such a choice. However, such exceptional equipment would represent a sort of individuality, and in a world where it was easy for someone to own something others already have in their possession, individuality was something that was hard to pursue. Vast Lushness happened to have something that could achieve this individuality, and it was apparent she did not wish to let this go. While she was frightened by just how this price was steadily rising, she was indeed guilty of toying with the idea of selling her staff off for real. Sakura Sakamuni's question, however, caused her to drop such a thought abruptly, shaking her head in response. "Looking at how quickly it's going, it seems that we may have to raise more money. We need to set a price at the last minute that no one will dare to even touch. Otherwise, at the rate of this surging price, we may be unable to snatch it back for ourselves," Sakura Sakamuni said. "Would it kill you to say fewer words?" Bluey's blurted out. "Did I say something wrong?" Sakura Sakamuni was nonplussed. Bluey's swept his gaze around the crowd vehemently. Sakura Sakamuni looked around and realized his folly. Discussing this out in the open like this was definitely inappropriate. Thankfully, most of their men were swarming this auction panel, so no one should have caught what he had said. Nevertheless, Sakura Sakamuni did not wish to risk it as he swiftly stopped talking. "Let's leave, Vast Lushness said. The crowd nodded and left the auction house together, discussing this matter over their private channel as they each went their separate ways. That night, when Gu Fei got online, the first thing he received was a message from Eternal Dominion. "I'm here." "Okay," Gu Fei answered. Asking Eternal Dominion where he was, it turned out that the man had also gotten online not too long ago and was not too far off from the designated log-off zone himself. Thus, Gu Fei went over to fetch him before finding out where everyone would be gathered today. It was still the same tavern as yesterday, so he brought Eternal Dominion along there. It was about 6:10 at this point, and it was still at least 20 minutes away from the time young Master Han had told everyone to meet up. However, a good half of the players were already in the tavern. It seemed that everybody was rather enthusiastic regarding this matter here. "That's almost everyone," young Master Han said when he saw Gu Fei and Eternal Dominion enter. Everybody exchanged greetings with one another. Bluey's had not met Eternal Dominion before, so he peppered the usual praises and expressions of admiration after they were properly introduced. Eternal Dominion smiled genially. "You're being far too polite. I've never met you before, brother. Are you someone from Beishi City? Do you have any concerns?" Concerns?" Bluey's was confused. "Is there anyone that has made you unhappy or such?" Eternal Dominion gave one such example. "Oh." Bluey's finally caught on, making the link back when Gu Fei recommended him to kill someone. It sounded as if he were a hitman. "Someone that had made me unhappy." As Bluey's pondered on this, his eyes involuntarily went to Sakura Sakamuni. "Fuck, what are you looking at me for?" Sakura Sakamuni was also very astute. "Hey, it seems that the relationship between you two aren't exactly on the best terms." Eternal Dominion appeared to be very eager. Everyone stared at the man. "Whoever can pay a higher fee, I'll help take care of the other person," Eternal Dominion declared. Everybody exchanged glances. "Hey, are you for real? You're gonna do business like this?" Gu Fei asked. "What's the problem?" Eternal Dominion asked back. "You need to be a little principled. You gotta at least go by first come, first served basis. If Bluey's approached you first to beat up Mooney, then you'd go ahead and beat him up. To actually offer your services to the highest bidder like this, how's that even appropriate? In the long run, who's gonna trust and recommend you?" Gu Fei asked. "Drunk bro." Sakura Sakamuni was in tears. He knew just how indomitable Eternal Dominion was as a fighter, so he was very unhappy about being used as an example. "I understand what you mean," Eternal Dominion laughingly said, "but since they are right before my eyes, and you've seen how much they hate each other so openly, don't you think doing this sort of auction will be giving them a chance for a fair competition?" "What you said makes sense as well." Gu Fei nodded. Thus, he turned to Bluey's and Sakura Sakamuni before he waved his hand. "Carry on, you guys." Bluey's and Sakura Sakamuni immediately reacted as if they were engaging with their adversary. They were uncertain if this was for real or not, but they were afraid that the other party would open with a bid, and Eternal Dominion's fist would go swinging to whichever direction. Their eyes met in this fierce confrontation, and their lips trembled. "I'll buy it." Svelte Dancer suddenly tossed out a coin pouch right on the table. "Oh, which one?" Eternal Dominion opened the pouch even as he asked. Quickly seeing the large sum inside, he immediately exclaimed, "So much! You can kill them both." Eternal Dominion even rolled up his sleeves the moment he finished his statement. Bluey's and Sakura Sakamuni were both shocked, uncertain just when they had offended the lady before them. "Not the two of them." Svelte Dancer quickly corrected. "It's Southern Lone Blade." "Do you know him?" "Oh, of course, I do." "It's him again," Eternal Dominion remarked. "Yup, him again." Gu Fei nodded. "But she's paid plenty more than last time." Eternal Dominion locked eyes with young Master Han. He had only earned a bottle of liquor after running all around the place with them the last time. "Yeah, now that your business is booming, and your reputation precedes you, the price you command increases as well." "Well done." "My eyes weren't wrong picking you," young Master Han praised. Eternal Dominion was delighted, keeping the coin pouch as he rubbed his fists together. "All right. Where's Southern Lone Blade?" "We're going to lure him out tonight," Gu Fei said. "Very good." Eternal Dominion returned to his seat, his posture straight like a javelin. That was when young Master Han led the conversation into the main topic at hand. "All right. It's now time for us to make our preparations. How are we gonna set up? Bluey's was a little excited. It had been quite some time since he had participated in a large-scale park. Set up? Young Master Han questioned and nodded his head soon after. He cleared the table first before he began. Well, if it's convenient for everyone, pass over 200 gold coins over here each. That should save us in having to remember individual contributions. Bluey's was stunned. When you said preparation, that's what you meant. What else would there be? There's still over an hour before the auction ends. Is there anything more critical than gathering the money we need? Young Master Han asked. Bluey's was in a daze, turning his head back stiffly. Everyone, pool your coins. 200 gold coins. Young Master Han shouted once more. Why? Someone could not stand but ask. Didn't I say before? To spare us the trouble of remembering individual contributions. Why do we need to remember it? Well, if you don't want to get your money back, you don't have to remember the amount. Young Master Han did not even turn his head, not even bothering to spare a glance to the idiot asking this question. Take note of who paid up to prevent people from fishing in troubled waters, young Master Han said to Bluey's. Fuck me. You should have said that sooner. Bluey's was flustered. Quite a few players did not even walk over, yet a few coin pouches were already piling up on the table. How was he supposed to know who paid up? Why don't you just get all your men to hand over the money? That way, you won't have to remember anything, young Master Han suggested. Everyone, pay up. Bluey's waved his hand. He was far too lazy to remember such minutia. What if we don't have 200 gold coins? There were quite a few who voiced this out. Then, your boss is gonna really hate you because he'll have to record your name and the exact sum you've contributed on a piece of paper, young Master Han replied drolly. Sure enough, Bluey's was very demoralized. Rolling his eyes, he shouted, those without 200 gold coins, come over to me. Chapter 569, Frenzied Bidding. The funds were quickly collected. Goofy and the others also took out 200 gold coins each as a show of solidarity. In no time, they had managed to raise a total of 34,624 gold coins. Bluey's was sweating as he held a bill record, madly doing the math to account for the money he and his men had put up, only sighing in relief when the total sum of gold coins matched the number of men perfectly. Everything good? Young Master Han asked when he saw his relieved expression. Bluey's nodded. Young Master Han looked at the time and got up. It's about time. Are you going to complete the transaction? Bluey's had his doubts. Young Master Han had the right job class. Still, had he not mentioned that they should not be using anyone's southern lone blade and his men would recognize before? Nope. There's someone else. Young Master Han turned to gaze at Vastlushness, who nodded slightly to confirm this. The others still had their doubts, for it looked as if Vastlushness and young Master Han had some sort of secret plan in place. Then, it's time we move out, too. Goofy rubbed his hands in anticipation. How are we going to set up our men by the spawn point? Do we have to leave a team of men in each of the 6 job class spawn points? Bluey's still held onto that style of ruthlessness he cultivated during his time in Y City. Could it be considered as a proper hunt if the target died just once? The enemy would not know what he or she was going up against if they did not at least camp them out for days on end at the spawn point. Anything goes. Young Master Han said. That unconcerned attitude of his made this seem like it was a fool's errand, causing Bluey's to feel a wave of doubt wash over him once more. It's like this. Finally, it was Vastlushness who patiently explained everything to the crowd. The auction will be over right at the stipulated time, but we can delay the retrieval of the staff by up to a whole week, which is why I'm prepared to store the magic staff there during this time. Bluey's was shocked as he proceeded to ask, Southern Lone Blade and his team must want to know where the staff ends up, so they'll surely stake out the auction house for a full week, all 24 hours? Vastlushness nodded. That's way too vicious. Bluey's sighed. It was no wonder that, despite being a vice guild leader during those days back in Y City, his position in the guild was incomparable to that of Vastlushness. Beyond the fact that she was the guild leader's wifey, just a look at this plan demonstrated the disparity between the two. Forcing the enemies to hang there for a week was far more sinister and crueler than crudely camping the spawn point. Doesn't that mean that there's no need to fight today? Everyone had been readying themselves for a fight the entire night, but they had not even considered that this kind of situation they were now facing would crop up. "There's no need," Vast Lushness said. "Aren't we luring Southern Lone Blade out?" Eternal Dominion had no idea what had happened or what was going on, so he did not have a clear understanding of the entirety of the plan, but he was at least able to make out that there would not be any fight today. "That's not what I said," young Master Han answered. Eternal Dominion turned to look at Gu Fei, who had a somber expression. "There are changes to the plan." Then, just as young Master Han was about to say something, someone suddenly burst through the tavern door and yelled, "Not good!" Bluey's turned around, and when he saw that the player was one of his comrades, he was immediately angered. "Why are you only here now? It's not that we won't be returning you your coin after chipping in. Is there a need for you to hide?" "No." "Something happened." That man was still yelling. "What happened?" everyone asked. "There are a lot of players over at the auction house," this man answered. Everyone went silent, waiting for him to elaborate further, but that man had nothing else to say. Bluey's was about to reprimand this man when young Master Han's expression changed abruptly. "Shit! What's wrong?" The others turned to look at him. "If there are too many players, we might be unable to get ourselves an auction console if we start to make our way over now," young Master Han explained. "Crap!" Everyone finally realized the gravity of the situation. They had actually glossed over this cruel and realistic problem. "Quick! We're leaving!" Bluey's bellowed, as the whole lot of players bolted out of the tavern. Vast Lushness was all the more anxious. It was evident that if they failed to get an auction console in time, it would be pointless no matter how many gold coins they had on hand. The magic staff would still change hands once the auction ended. The crowd of men rushed to the auction house, and they could tell at a single glance how hopeless the situation was. Every auction console in the auction house looked to have gathered a throng of crowd. And just like the crowd waiting for the bus during peak hours, everyone was jostling with one another to use it. While there appeared to be gaps between the players, that was the empty space the system provided for each player in a designated safe zone, restricting players from physical contact between each other. Furthermore, even though the auction house and trade exchange were not designated as log-off points for players, it was actually a safe zone that was a lot safer than the designated log-off points. In these two areas, players were unable to even use their skills or spells at all. Even Bounty Mission, which was not restricted by the designated log-off points, was sealed here. There was really no way to even make their way in, considering just how crowded the place had become. This problem that often happened in real life suddenly appeared in a MMO, momentarily blindsiding even young Master Han as a result. After all, it was impossible for such a problem to surface in conventional games. No matter how many players there were, separating the interface would do the trick, so why would there even be a need for players to squeeze into a building like this? However, the scene before them was just like that. Everyone was eyeing each other, unable to do anything about it. The auction house was in an uproar, but because no one could make any move, everyone did their best to unleash their communication skills, and curses rang about endlessly. Gu Fei and the others walked 2 whole rounds and realized that there were many like them that were unable to interact with the auction consoles. Currently, all these players were wearing troubled looks as they lambasted the others, similarly powerless to the situation. In this super safe zone, there was no difference between a powerhouse like Gu Fei and a level 0 noob. What do we do now? Everyone had this question upon their lips. Vast Lushness looked at the time and saw that there was only 20 minutes left before the auction ended. Looking at the situation, there's a chance that we won't be able to get that magic staff back, but you'll at least be able to sell it for a very high price. Sakura Sakamuni already started consoling her. "Yeah, I'll treat everyone to drinks once I receive the payment for it." Even though Vast Lushness was smiling at Sakura Sakamuni when she said this, anyone could tell that it was forced. There was no doubt that this lady was someone who valued sentimentality, be it in people or with her possessions. This was a magic staff that she had with her for a long time, and now that it was really going to change hands, no amount of money out there was enough to soothe her unsettled heart. As for the value she could get for the equipment itself, it was nothing more than an improvement for this sadness. Bluey's could not bear to watch it any longer. Pulling out a big pouch of gold coins, he sought to negotiate with the players around, hoping to buy themselves a way in. In the end, the players in the outermost circle were also feeling annoyed at being unable to find a way in to place their bids. All of them only had one word for Bluey's attempted bribery: scram. Why would any of these players that dared to bid for this magic staff be short of coins themselves? Others had already used the method Bluey's was using now, and that bloody path they had carved out for themselves with gold was stopped right by the layer of players in touching distance to the auction console. None of them was willing to let go of their position even in the face of death. Those players essentially paid a heavy price only to end up in the prime position to watch others bid, and that only served to add to the feeling of desolation in their hearts. Bluey's heard such talks after going around a few times and no longer dared to try the same. He returned to the group, dispirited at his failure to find a way in, and shook his head at Vast Lushness. Vast Lushness did not say anything. All she did was to heave a light sigh, before turning to Goofy and the other experts. Let's head over to the pickup point and see if Southern Lone Blade and the others are around. It was apparent that the situation had gone out of hand, and all they could do was watch their act become a reality. This time, they really had to kill Southern Lone Blade. Whoa, are you for real? Such top-grade equipment, I'm gonna drop 3,000 gold coins on it. A loud cry was suddenly heard. Everyone turned around and saw that it was Fireball there shouting to nowhere in particular. Meanwhile, on a raised platform before him, Goofy had set up a stall, calmly putting his Moonlit Nightfalls on display. Fireball's shouting had the effect of drawing the attention of the surrounding players who had nothing to do. After scowling in disdain, they instinctively swept their gazes over Moonlit Nightfalls, which was on display. As an item that was displayed on a stall, the stats would automatically be revealed to all, and the eyes of these players could not bear to peel them off after that single glance. Adding the fact that Fireball continued to call out, "Sell it to me! Sell it to me!" More and more players' gazes began to be drawn over it. There were plenty of priests that had rushed over to bid over the Utopian magic staff, but at the same time, there were many other job classes that had come over to spectate. With how shockingly high Moonlit Nightfall's magic damage was, as well as the physical damage inherent to the sword far outstripping the standard of level 40 equipment currently in use, plenty of job classes were tempted by what they saw, including the minority of dark priests among the priest folks. With that single glance, plenty of mages and warriors instantly surged forth to surround the stall, as shouts of "how much?" filled the air. Perhaps, these people were entrusted by their friends to help buy the Utopian magic staff, but upon seeing that they no longer had the chance of even making a bid for it, and something far stronger than the Utopian magic staff that was suitable to their job classes promptly popped up, why would they not come flocking like moths to a flame? Goofy was instantaneously energized by this, bellowing, "I can't make my way to the auction console, so I'll just do the auction out here." Shout if you want to make a bid, make sure to be louder. 3,000, 3,000. Fireball was the closest, and he continued to shout madly right under the platform. 3,000, your head. Someone openly mocked Fireball, calling out 3,000 was simply an insult in the face of such a top-grade equipment. "I'll raise it to 3,100. That man shouted. TSK. The crowd thought he was going to say something impressive, yet all he did was raise the bid by 100 gold coins. 3,300, 3,400, 3,500, 4,000. The price continued to rise, each higher than the last. Goofy did not care if these players were like Fireball, shouting for the sake of creating a ruckus, and continued to repeat the highest price whenever it came up. In no time, the price was well beyond that of the Utopian magic staff, which was originally what drew all the priests across Parallel World over here. Those players that were initially dedicated to this particular auction only treated the commotion around them to be no more than a distraction, but upon hearing the price had gone beyond the equipment that they first had their eyes on, these men could not stand it any longer and turned back to have a look. Moonlit Nightfalls was ultimately a combat weapon. Priests were able to maintain their calm in the fact of this, but other players could not sit still after catching a glimpse of it. This was especially the case for those non-priests that were in the inner circle nearest to the auction consoles, busily bidding over the Utopian magic staff. Most of them were asked by their friends to do so, Or perhaps they were players who had been asked along by someone they knew to help increase the chances of successfully acquiring the magic staff. Right now, every fiber in their bodies were straining over this temptation, for the appearance of a more suitable piece of top-grade equipment than the utopian magic staff had appeared behind them. They felt that there were 100 claws scratching at their hearts. With the temptation they felt itching unbearably. The price was still surging upward, and it was far more intense than the bidding war for the utopian magic staff offered by the auction console in the auction house. The bids for Moonlit Nightfalls increased at a rapid speed, as players fought over it with one another, with some just directly using real-world currency to bid and others inviting the seller to complete the transaction over at the trade exchange. This is a chance not to be missed. That was a sentiment shared by many. Gritting their teeth, they abandoned their scramble to purchase the utopian magic staff. These players turned their backs and dashed right into that mob of players, struggling to wave their hands to catch the attention of the seller, yelling out a high price at the same time. There were even players who felt that they were either too far, or the crowd was too noisy for the person to hear, so they took out paper to write down a sum on it, sticking it to their weapons and raised it high above the crowd. Okay, that bro over there just offered 9,700 gold coins. Are there any higher bids, friends? Goofy shouted as the priest, who was in charge of making the bid for the utopian magic staff for vast lushness, grasped onto the opportunity of this debacle and managed to get a position by an auction console with the help of everyone. This person flashed a thumbs up at Goofy. Chapter 570, Precision Bidding Expert. Now that Goofy's goal had been achieved, he decisively sent a message out, and that person who had already tacitly took the hint. Having been waiting for the right moment, she leapt right onto the raised platform that Goofy was on, raised a bag of money high, and yelled, "I bid 20,000 gold coins." The ensuing silence was deafening. The auction house had never had a moment of silence ever since the utopian magic staff was placed on auction, and just as the auction for this magnificent sword was coming to a close, what should have been an intense period suddenly became extremely quiet, so much so that everyone could hear the sound of their breathing. 20,000. Someone slapped his thigh loudly, wondering if this was all just a dream. Everyone's attention swiftly went from the Moonlit Nightfalls to the formidable existence that had just called out that absurd amount of gold coins. Dressed in red, a female thief, and 20,000 gold coins. All the characteristics matched what they knew, and the name of that legendary player quickly came to everyone's mind: Svelte Dancer. Those players that were looking to question this woman's intentions swiftly shut their mouths. Those who hoped to cause trouble, players calling out prices wildly despite not having the gold to back it up, recalled the rumors of how violent this lady was and swiftly shut their mouths as well. Everyone stared silently at that woman standing tall atop the platform, overlooking the crowd as she dangled that bag of money in her hand. 20,000 gold coins. Is there anyone higher? Goofy was the one speaking now, and he continued to play the part of the auctioneer. Fuck, not even content with 20,000. Some of the people in the crowd began to turn against Goofy, with some even throwing trash his way. Thankfully, they were still within the limits of the designated safe zone, so while the crowd could move to throw things, what they tossed would never leave their hands no matter what they did. Is there no one else higher than 20,000 gold coins? 20,000 going once. Goofy shouted. Twice. Thrice. Sold to this beautiful lady right here. Goofy applauded, but no one joined in. Everyone was almost dying from envy, so why would any of them be happy over someone else successfully purchasing such a magnificent piece of top-grade equipment? The crowd watched with open eyes as the two exchanged money and weapon. This was the only interaction that players could do in this super safe zone, and their hearts were all dripping blood bearing witness to this. Not everyone present was keeping their attention on this shocking transaction. Aside from young Master Han and the men they had brought that knew this was all a show, there were a handful of players in the know as well. Yizia, Uu and Broken Water Arrow were made aware that the Utopian magic staff was being auctioned last night and had instantly made their way over to the auction house the moment they found out that the staff belonged to Vast Lushness. Yiziao was the only person that had not left the auction console for the entire day and night that passed. Is there a need to go to such lengths? Broken Water Arrow did not understand this display of insanity. Furthermore, He saw that Yixiao would intermittently throw out a bid every now and then, and at other times, he would be intently watching the price changes, noting down something in his booklet from time to time. If I don't do my homework, I can't be 100% sure of winning this magic staff, Yixiao replied. What do you mean? Broken Water Arrow was confused. Look here. Yixiao continued to stare at the auction console unblinkingly as he explained to Broken Water Arrow. Even though the staff is auctioned for a 24-hour period, details like when it begins, when it ends, and how much time's left are not displayed. According to the intel we've gathered, we know that staff was listed at about 8 p.m., and this means that aside from having the necessary funds to make the final bid, you'll need sufficient luck as well. Bidding the moment right before the auction ends will let you win the auction. Oh, so you're trying to calculate the exact time this staff was placed on auction, right? Broken Water Arrow asked. How's that possible? What I'm doing now is getting a grasp of the rules behind the refresh rates when it comes to the movement of the bid price. This ensures that I'll be able to bid at the most crucial moment, higher than that of any competitors, Yixiao explained. There's a rule for this as well? Broken Water Arrow was perplexed. Normally, no, but there should be one now, Yixiao replied. I don't get it, Broken Water Arrow said. Let me simplify it for you. The bids look to be refreshing real time on this auction console, but really it is done at a set interval. Let's say it's done every second, which means that in a single minute, the bid will at most jump 60 times, nothing more. However, if there are over 60 bids in that 1 second, the system can't possibly show all the 60 bids one by one. It will instead settle it behind the scenes, choosing only the highest bid and showing it on the auction interface for that second. However, when the competition is this intense, there's a type of situation that might occur. What sort of situation? When 2 or more players make the exact same bid. Oh yeah. Then, what will happen in that case? The system will then go according to time and screen it. The first player who make the bid will get priority, while the other player will get the system prompt that their bid has failed, Yixiao said. Okay, I sorta understand now, but what's the rule you're trying to grasp? What I'm trying to grasp is the delay that will result for the system when the same bid is made. Let me give you an example. Right now, the auction console shows the bid of 3,000 gold coins, when in fact, it is already sorting out the next batch of bids at 3,100 gold coins. Get a grasp of this delay, and I can make a bid at the precise time. This will ensure that every time I make a bid, I'll always be ahead of the other bidders in comparison, Yixiao replied. Is that even possible? Even though you've used the term delay, but it's really just something that happens in the span of a second. Broken Water Arrow said. Which is why I am working hard right now. Yixiao reasoned. Do you need my help with anything? Broken Water Arrow asked. It'd be helpful if you have a stopwatch, Yixiao remarked. Can you find such a thing in the game? Nope. Work harder, then. Broken Water Arrow encouraged, no longer saying another word after. The entire conversation had been done through private messages, and the 2 players had looked like they were conscientiously looking at the auction console the whole time, almost as if they were one with the army of bidders surrounding them. In order to better grasp this 1-second delay, Yixiao spent the entire day online without any rest, especially when he thought that the furious bidding would only really begin after 7 p.m. The burst of bids and the refreshing of the latest bids would be much more than what it was like now, and the speed of the bids coming in would be far more urgent. As a result, he did not end up in the awkward position of having no auction console available to participate in the auction like Gufei and the others. When Broken Water Arrow came online later in the night, he was in the same plight as Gufei and the rest. Without any spot available for him, he could only loiter about outside the auction console that Yixiao was using. There were plenty of players in the auction house, so neither Gufei and the others nor Broken Water Arrow noticed one another's presence. It was only until Gufei suddenly leapt up a raised platform and started yelling out his auction that Broken Water Arrow abruptly noticed what was going on, quickly sending a message to Yixiao. 1,000 miles drunks auctioning his moonlit nightfalls. It was just as Yixiao, who had a whole day researching, had expected. When 7 p.m. arrived, a large mass of players began madly bidding for the magic staff, the situation turning far more severe than what he saw in the day. Yi Xiao was already mentally prepared for this, so he even knew just how many players can access all the auction consoles at any given time. Everything was happening just as he had calculated, yet he did not dare to be lax at all. Focusing intently on his bidding against his competitors, he did not seem to realize just what Gu Fei was doing behind his back this whole time. It was not until Yi Xiao felt that he was adept at using the console that he gave a sigh of relief and pulled up the messages he had received during this period. 1,000 miles drunks auctioning his moonlit nightfalls. Broken Water Arrow had sent this message 5 times. Where is it? Yi Xiao was surprised. He did not see it appear on the auction console at all. Right behind you. Broken Water Arrow had finally gotten Yi Xiao to reply. Yi Xiao hurriedly looked backward, just in time to see Svelte Dancer leap onto the raised platform and yell at her intention to purchase Moonlit Nightfalls for 20,000 gold coins. Yi Xiao was stunned. He could tell that the woman was Svelte Dancer, but she was already an acquaintance of Gu Fei. So what was all this about? Svelte Dancer's appearance here was something Yi Xiao had not foreseen. If he did not witness this scene himself, he would surely bid for Moonlit Nightfalls at all cost himself. To him, being able to take that extremely over-level weapon off Gu Fei's hands would mean that he was halfway done with rectifying Gu Fei. However, Svelte Dancer's appearance here made him realize that this was a sort of act, so he did not make any move on his part. Are you not continuing to bid? Now that the auction outside had ended, Broken Water Arrow saw that Yi Xiao was still standing there distracted, so he quickly sent a message to remind him. Yi Xiao came around and returned his concentration back onto the auction console. Meanwhile, Gloon Flame Cinched Clothes, who had seen the whole transaction happen from within the crowd, also reported this momentous news over to Southern Lone Blade and the others urgently, especially the frightening stats that Moonlit Nightfalls possessed. These adversaries of Gu Fei were all trembling in fear when they saw it, knowing full well that Gu Fei's insta-kill damage had the support of that weapon. This was essentially great news for them when they heard that he was actually selling that sword off. Alas, all good things had to come to an end. By the time Svelte Dancer leapt onto the platform and bought Moonlit Nightfalls, Gloon Flame Cinched Clothes were extremely disappointed, sighing in unison. Fucking hell. What a pair of shrew and scoundrel. What happened? Southern Lone Blade and the others were unable to make sense of what either man meant after hearing that. Svelte Dancer bought his weapon in the end, the two reported bitterly. What's going on? What are they planning to do? Southern Lone Blade furrowed his brows. We have no idea. Flame Cinched Clothes and Glue were of course unable to guess that Gu Fei had done all that just to draw people's attention to him in order to help the person they had in charge to bid for the magic staff to get to the auction console. Let's not care about that first. The two of you, keep your eyes peeled. Should we expose them? Flame Cinched Clothes suddenly had this sly idea come to him. What are we gonna do even if we expose them? What sort of deep grudge can we foster between them and everyone? Let's not bother with pointless drivel like that, just make sure to keep watch. Southern Lone Blade said. Flame Cinched Clothes heaved a deep sigh at being unable to deal a blow onto Gu Fei. Actually, all of you can come out here today. With so many players out here in the auction house, there's no way anyone will notice you mixed in this thronging crowd here. The two continued to watch the NPC in charge of the delivery of goods at one side as they chatted leisurely. Ah! Fuck! Damn! The auction house was suddenly in turmoil as a series of curses rang all around the premises. The auction for the Utopian magic staff had officially ended, and the players that had not been able to put in their bids in time all vented their sadness in a timely manner. It was like they had lost a bet they had placed, only they were more hoping to be able to spend the money, instead. How was it? Broken Water Arrow and Vast Lushness were in two different parties, yet they sent that same message over to their respective bidding expert.